Clara Bennett's hands trembled as she faced the banker who wanted to own her. Behind her stood Ethan Sawyer, the man she'd promised herself to 8 years ago. The man the whole town said was too old, too broken, too alone for a woman like her. "Choose me," Marcus Dalton said, holding the deed to her father's land. "Or watch everything you love disappear." Clara looked back at Ethan, his scarred hands, his weathered face, his eyes that had saved her life in a blizzard when she was just a girl. "I already chose," she whispered. Before we begin, if you believe in keeping promises and second chances, hit that subscribe button. Stay with us until the end. This story will make you believe in love again. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story can travel. Silverstone, Wyoming Territory. Winter. 1877. The blizzard hit like God's fury. Clara Bennett should have been home an hour ago. Should have listened when her father said the sky looked wrong. Should have stayed in town instead of taking the shortcut through the canyon. But 14-year-olds think they know everything, and Clara was no exception. Now she was going to die for it. Her horse had thrown her a mile back, spooked by thunder that sounded like cannon fire. She'd watched him disappear into the white wall of snow, taking her only chance of survival with him. Her coat, too thin, always too thin because father couldn't afford better, might as well have been made of paper. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That's what scared her most. She'd heard the stories. Old Pete Morrison found frozen 3 winters back, sitting against a tree, like he'd just stopped to rest. Mary Catherine's little brother lost between the barn and the house just 50 feet he couldn't see through the snow. Clara stumbled, fell to her knees. The snow felt soft, welcoming almost. "Get up," something inside her screamed. "Get up or you'll never get up again." But her legs wouldn't listen. She thought about her mother, buried 6 years now. Wondered if dying hurt less when you knew you'd see someone again on the other side. Thought about her father, who'd find her body come spring thaw. That would kill him slower than the blizzard killed her. "I'm sorry, Papa," she whispered to the wind. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Hoofbeats. "Here." Her voice came out as barely a rasp. She tried again, forcing air through frozen lungs. "Here, I'm here." The snow parted like a curtain, and through it came a man on a horse so black it looked like a hole torn in the world. The man was massive shoulders, broad as an axe handle, sitting tall in the saddle despite the wind trying to tear him off. He swung down before the horse even stopped moving. Strong hands grabbed Clara's arms, lifting her like she weighed nothing. "Can you hear me?" His voice was rough, urgent. "Girl, can you hear me?" Clara tried to answer. Her lips wouldn't move right. The man swore something creative involving damnation and weather and wrapped his coat around her. It was still warm from his body, smelling of leather and wood smoke and something else. Safety, maybe. Or maybe that was just what dying felt like. He lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, one arm locked around her waist. "Hold on. My ranch isn't far." Clara wanted to tell him she couldn't hold on, couldn't feel her hands anymore. But then the horse was moving, and the man's arm tightened, and she realized she didn't need to hold on. He was doing it for her. She passed out somewhere between the canyon and salvation. When Clara opened her eyes, she was dying again. At least, that's what it felt like. Fire raged through her fingers and toes, the kind of burning pain that meant frozen flesh coming back to life. "There you are." That rough voice again. "Don't fight it. Pain means you're winning." She was lying on a bed, no a sofa, in front of a fireplace big enough to roast a pig. Blankets piled on top of her, heavy as guilt. The man knelt beside her, wrapping her hands in warm cloth. "Hurts," Clara managed through chattering teeth. "I know. That's good. That's real good." She focused on his face for the first time. Hard features carved by weather and time. He could have been 30 or 50, impossible to tell with men who lived outside. Dark hair needed cutting, jaw needed shaving. But his eyes, pale blue like winter ice, held something unexpected. Kindness. You saved me. Wasn't much of a choice. Couldn't leave you out there. Most people would have missed me in that storm. I wasn't looking for you specifically. Needed to check the north fence. Saw your tracks before they got covered. He poured something hot from a pot into a tin cup. Drink this. Slowly. Broth. Rich and salty, warming her from the inside. Clara's hands shook too badly to hold the cup, so the man helped her, one hand supporting her head. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara. Clara Bennett. My father's the blacksmith in Silverstone." "Thomas's girl." Recognition flickered. "He'll be worried." "Can't ride back in this." Clara stated the obvious, but she was 14 and scared, and needed to hear someone confirm she wasn't making another stupid decision. "No. Storm will blow through by morning. I'll take you home then." "What's your name?" He hesitated like he'd forgotten people asked that question. "Ethan? Ethan Sawyer." "Thank you, Mr. Sawyer." "Ethan's fine." Clara looked around the cabin, calling it a house would be generous. One large room divided by function rather than walls. Kitchen area with a cast iron stove. Sleeping area with a narrow bed. This sofa by the fire, probably where he actually slept, so he could tend the flames through the night. Everything clean, but worn. Built by hands that knew work, but not comfort. "You live here alone." "I do." "That seems lonely." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I manage." Clara wanted to ask more, wanted to ask why a man like this, capable and clearly not cruel, lived alone in the middle of nowhere, but exhaustion pulled at her like undertow. The warmth, the safety, the simple fact of being alive, it all crashed over her at once. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Then sleep. I'll keep the fire going." "You won't leave?" "Not going anywhere." Clara's eyes drifted shut. Just before sleep took her, she murmured something that felt important. "When I grow up, I'm going to marry you." She didn't hear Ethan's response, a soft, sad laugh, and words spoken too quiet to wake her. "You'll forget me long before then, little one." Morning came cold and clear. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Her body ached in about 17 places, but the pain was distant now. Manageable. She was alive, and that seemed like a miracle written in frost on the windows. Ethan stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd shaved, she noticed. Changed into a clean shirt. Making himself presentable to take her home. "Morning," Clara said. He turned. "How you feeling?" "Like I got trampled by a whole cattle drive. But alive." "Alive's a good start." He brought her a plate, bacon, eggs, biscuits, that looked only slightly burnt. "Eat. Then we ride." They ate in silence. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Like words weren't necessary when you'd already said the important things. Outside, the world had transformed. Yesterday's fury had given way to blinding white beauty. Snow piled 3 feet deep in drifts, glittering under a sun so bright it hurt to look at directly. Ethan's horse, a gelding named Buck, she learned stood saddled and ready. "You'll ride in front again," Ethan said. "Can't risk you falling off." Clara's cheeks burned. "I'm a good rider. It was the storm." "I know, but I'm still putting you in front." There was no arguing with that tone. Clara let him lift her onto Buck, then settled as he swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist again, and this time Clara noticed details she'd been too frozen to register before. How solid he felt. How his heartbeat was steady against her back. How safe she felt pressed against a stranger who shouldn't have felt like anything but a stranger. The ride to Silverstone took 2 hours through snow that would have been impossible alone. Ethan's horse seemed to know the way by instinct, picking the safest path through drifts and around hidden ravines. "You do this often?" Clara asked. "Rescue people?" "More often than I'd like. Winter kills the careless and the unlucky, without much distinction." "Which was I." "Both." but his tone wasn't cruel. "You're young. Careless comes with that territory. But you were unlucky, too, that storm rolled in faster than anyone predicted." Clara twisted to look at him. "How did you know where to look?" "Didn't. Just got lucky myself." His eyes met hers briefly, before returning to the trail. "Sometimes fortune favors fools and girls who don't know better than to walk through canyons in December. I know better now." "Good. Would hate to fish you out of a snowdrift twice." They crested the ridge overlooking Silverstone. The town spread below them 24 buildings clustered around a main street, smoke rising from chimneys into the pale sky. Clara could see people moving, digging out from the storm. Somewhere down there, her father was probably losing his mind with worry. "Mr. Sawyer, Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why do you live alone?" His arm tightened fractionally. "That's a big question for a small girl." "I'm not that small." "You're 14. Almost 15. Ethan was quiet so long, Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I had a woman once. We were supposed to marry. She died before we could." "I'm sorry." "Long time ago now. But you never found anyone else?" "Didn't look. Figured I'd used up my chance." Clara turned again more fully this time, until she could see his face properly. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." Ethan's expression didn't change. "It's just life." "It doesn't have to be." "What are you suggesting I go courting?" He almost smiled. "I'm 32 years old girl. Women my age are married with children. Young ones want men who know how to talk pretty and dance at socials. I know how to mend fence and birth calves and shoot straight. Not much else to recommend me." "You saved my life." "That's not a qualification for marriage." Clara faced forward again, but her voice carried determination that surprised even her. "When I grow up, I'm going to marry you." This time Ethan did laugh, a rusty sound like he didn't use it much. "You said that last night." "I meant it." "You'll meet some boy your own age, someone who knows how to court proper." "I don't want someone my own age. Boys are stupid." "And you think men are smarter?" "I think you're smarter and kinder than you want people to know, and lonely." Clara's voice dropped. "I don't like thinking about you living alone in that cabin with nobody to talk to." Ethan was quiet again. Then, "Clara Bennett, you're either the sweetest or the strangest girl I've ever met." "Can't I be both?" "I suppose you can at that." They reached Silverstone's main street. People stopped mid-shovel to stare. News traveled faster than lightning in towns this small. Everyone would know she'd been missing by now. Her father would know. The blacksmith shop sat at the far end of town, smoke already rising from the forge. Before they reached it, the door burst open and Thomas Bennett came running, limping on his bad leg, but moving faster than Clara had seen in years. "Clara!" His voice cracked. "Clara, baby?" Ethan reined Buck to a stop. Thomas reached up, tears streaming down his weathered face, and Clara practically fell into his arms. "I thought when you didn't come home the storm—" He couldn't finish, just held her like she might disappear if he let go. "I'm okay, Papa. I'm okay." Thomas looked up at Ethan, still mounted, and something passed between the men. Understanding. Gratitude too deep for words. "You found her." "Lucky timing." "Lucky?" Thomas laughed, but it sounded like crying. "Mister, you saved my daughter's life. That's not luck, that's providence." "Just happened to be checking fence." "Thank you." Thomas's voice shook. "Thank you. If you hadn't—" "But I did. She's safe. That's what matters." A crowd gathered. Curious faces concerned neighbors. Old Mrs. Henderson clucking about foolish girls. The Reverend murmuring thanks to Providence. Sheriff Morgan wanting to know details so he could log them official. Through it all, Ethan sat Buck patiently answering questions in short sentences, deflecting praise like bullets off armor. He looked uncomfortable with the attention Clara realized. like he wanted to turn Buck around and ride back to his isolated cabin where people didn't thank him or look at him like he'd done something extraordinary. Finally, Thomas seemed to remember his manners. "Come inside. Let me pay you." "No need." "Then let me shoe your horse, free of charge, something." "Really, I should." Ethan Sawyer. Clara's father drew himself up to his full height, still 6 inches shorter than Ethan mounted. "You saved my only child, my only family. I'm a proud man, but I'm not so proud I can't say I owe you everything I got. Now you come inside, have some coffee at least, and let me shake your hand proper without half the town gawking." Ethan looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Thomas's face must have convinced him, because he swung down from Buck and followed them into the shop. The blacksmith shop was warm and smoky, smelling of hot metal and coal. Clara's small room sat off to one side, just a curtain for privacy, but it was home. Thomas gestured Ethan to a stool while he poured coffee into chipped mugs. "How long you been at your ranch?" Thomas asked. 5 years. Bought it off a widow heading back east." "Hard land out there." "It is." "You make it work alone?" "Manage." Ethan took the coffee, wrapping his large hands around the mug. "Hire extra hands during roundup. Rest of the time it's just me and Buck." Thomas studied him over the rim of his own mug. "You married son." Thomas Bennett. Clara felt her face burn. "You can't just ask." "It's a fair question." Ethan's voice stayed even. "No, sir, not married. Was engaged once long time ago. She passed." "I'm sorry to hear that. Lost my own wife 6 years back." "I remember. Made the horseshoes for her burial plot." Thomas nodded slowly. "That's right. You did." He glanced at Clara, then back to Ethan. "You got family anywhere?" "Not anymore. Parents died during the war. Brother, too." "So you're alone out there?" "Seems we've established that." Clara could see her father working up to something. She knew that look, the one he got when he was trying to be subtle, but wasn't quite pulling it off. "Papa, what are you doing?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just making conversation." Thomas set down his mug. "Ethan, you seem like a good man. Solid. The kind who keeps his word and doesn't run when things get hard." "I try to be. My daughter's a good judge of character. Always has been. And she seems to think highly of you." "Papa." Clara's face felt hot enough to forge iron. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or horror. Hard to tell. "I appreciate the coffee," Ethan said, standing. "But I should head back. Got livestock to check on." "Of course. Of course." Thomas walked him to the door. At the threshold, he gripped Ethan's hand. "Thank you again, truly. If you ever need anything, shoes for your horses, repairs, anything, you come see me. No charge, ever." "That's generous." "It's not generous. It's a debt I can't ever fully repay." Ethan nodded, then looked past Thomas to where Clara stood in the shadows. "You stay smart, Clara Bennett. No more shortcuts in December." "I won't, I promise." "Good." He stepped out into the cold. Clara darted past her father, ignoring his protest, and caught Ethan before he could mount Buck. "Wait," he turned. "What is it?" Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a ribbon faded blue that had been her mother's. She'd carried it every day since the funeral. "I want you to have this." Ethan looked at the ribbon like it might bite him. "I can't take that." "Yes, you can. It was my mama's. Now it's yours." "Clara, you saved my life. That means something. And I meant what I said." She pressed the ribbon into his calloused palm. "When I grow up, I'm going to marry you. So keep this, as a promise." For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her. Then so quietly she almost missed it. "You're going to break that promise, little one." "No." Clara smiled. "I won't." She turned and ran back inside before he could argue further. Through the window, she watched him stand there, looking at the ribbon in his hand. Finally, he tucked it into his pocket-mounted buck and rode out of town without looking back. Thomas came to stand beside her. "You really meant that about marrying him?" "Yes." "Clara, honey, you're 14. He's a grown man." "I know. That's why I said when I grow up." "People will talk." "Let them." Thomas sighed. "You're as stubborn as your mother was." "Thank you." That wasn't necessarily a compliment. But he put his arm around her shoulders. "What if you change your mind? What if you meet someone else?" Clara watched until Ethan disappeared into the tree line. "I won't." Boston, Massachusetts. Spring 1878. 3 months later, everything changed again. Clara was helping her father in the forge when Sheriff Morgan arrived with a telegram. Thomas read it twice, his face going pale. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Your Aunt Josephine. She's ill. Asking for you." Aunt Josephine was Thomas's only sibling, a widow living in Boston with means enough to live comfortable but no children of her own. Clara had met her twice briefly and remembered a stern woman who smelled like lavender and disapproval. "Why is she asking for me?" Thomas handed her the telegram. Clara read, "Dying. Stop. Want to meet niece properly. Stop. Send girl if possible. Stop. Can provide for her future. Stop." "I'm not going," Clara said immediately. "Clara? No, I'm not leaving you alone. It's just for a visit, few months maybe, until she—" Thomas couldn't finish. "No." But her father's expression was already shifting into that look he got when he was going to be stubborn about something. "Listen to me. Josephine is offering something I can never give you. Education, opportunities, a chance at a better life than Silverstone can provide." "I don't want a better life. I like this one." "You say that now, but you're young, Clara. You haven't seen enough of the world to know what you're choosing." "I've seen enough. I know where I belong." Thomas set down his hammer. "When your mother died, I promised her I'd take care of you. Give you every chance to grow into the woman she would have wanted you to be. Josephine can offer you that. I can't. So you're sending me away. I'm giving you a choice." He gripped her shoulders. "Go to Boston. Learn what they can teach you. If you still want to come back to Silverstone when you're grown, I won't stop you. But at least you'll know what else is out there." Clara felt tears burning. "And if I refuse, then I'll respect that. But I'll always wonder if I failed your mother by not trying harder." That's how Thomas Bennett won arguments, not by demanding, but by making you feel like refusing would hurt him more than it hurt you. Clara left for Boston 2 weeks later. The train ride took 3 days. Clara watched Wyoming disappear behind her, the mountains giving way to plains to farmland, to cities that grew bigger and busier until Boston swallowed her whole. Aunt Josephine met her at the station, thinner than Clara remembered, leaning on a cane. But her eyes were sharp as ever. "So you're Thomas's girl?" "Yes, ma'am." "You look like your mother. That's fortunate. You'll do well here." She turned without waiting for response. "Come along. The carriage is waiting." Josephine's house was in Beacon Hill, 3 stories of brick and propriety. Servants opened doors. Everything smelled of furniture polish and old money. Clara's room was bigger than her father's entire shop, with a bed soft enough to drown in. She hated it immediately. "You'll start lessons tomorrow," Josephine announced over dinner, actual courses served on actual china, not stew eaten from tin bowls. "Reading, writing, mathematics. French if you show aptitude. You'll need to catch up considerably if you're to make anything of yourself." "I can read and write fine." "Can you parse Latin, discuss Wordsworth, navigate social situations without embarrassing yourself?" Josephine's gaze was withering. "I thought not. You're rough, child. Rough can be polished, but it takes work." Clara wanted to argue that she didn't want to be polished. She wanted to go home. But she'd promised her father she'd try, so she swallowed the words and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That night, alone in her too-soft bed, Clara pulled out the only piece of home she'd brought, a letter from her father, and tucked inside it a second piece of paper. She'd written to Ethan Sawyer before leaving. "Just a short note, I'm going to Boston for a while. But I'll come back. I keep my promises." She didn't know if he'd received it. Didn't know if he'd even read it if he had. But writing it had felt important, like making a promise to herself as much as to him. Clara pressed the letter to her chest and whispered into the darkness, "I'll come back. I will." Boston didn't answer. But somewhere hundreds of miles west, maybe Ethan Sawyer heard her anyway. "8 years later. Silverstone, Wyoming Territory. Spring, 1885. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday. Clara was in the middle of teaching irregular French verbs to a classroom of bored merchants' sons when the headmaster knocked. One look at his face told her something was wrong. "Miss Bennett, you need to come with me." She followed him to his office, heart hammering. The telegram sat on his desk, yellow paper screaming emergency in its very existence. "Father injured. Stop. Forge accident. Stop. Come home. Stop." Clara didn't remember packing. Didn't remember telling Aunt Josephine dead these past 2 years, leaving Clara with an education and a small inheritance, but no reason to stay east. She must have done both things, because 2 days later she was on a train heading west with a bag full of dresses too fancy for Silverstone and a teaching certificate that seemed less valuable with every mile. The mountains appeared on the horizon like old friends welcoming her home. Clara stepped off the train at the closest station, still a day's ride from Silverstone, and hired a horse. She'd forgotten how much she'd missed riding. 8 years in Boston, 8 years of carriages and horse cars, and walking on cobblestone streets. Now she sat a saddle again and remembered who she used to be. The girl who made foolish promises. The girl who meant them anyway. Silverstone hadn't changed much. Maybe a few more buildings, maybe a coat of fresh paint on the general store. But it was still small, still rough around its edges, still home in a way Boston never had been. The blacksmith shop looked the same too, until Clara got close enough to see the scorch marks on one wall, the fresh boards replacing burnt ones. Her stomach clenched. Inside she found her father sitting by the cold forge, his right hand wrapped in bandages, his face gray with pain. "Papa?" Thomas looked up and his expression crumbled. "Clara. My Clara." She ran to him, carefully mindful of his injury. "What happened?" "Got careless, distracted, hammer slipped and—" He gestured helplessly at his hand. "Doctor says I'll heal, but I can't work for months. Maybe longer." Clara pulled back to look at him properly. He'd aged more than 8 years should have allowed. Gray in his beard now, lines carved deep around his eyes. When had her father become old? "I'll take care of you," she said. "I have money from Aunt Josephine. We'll manage." "It's not just my hand." Thomas's voice dropped. "I borrowed money to repair the forge, from Marcus Dalton's bank. Can't pay it back if I can't work." "How much?" $500. Clara's heart sank. That was more than most men in Silverstone made in 2 years. "When's it due?" 3 months. "And Clara—" He hesitated. "Marcus has been coming around, making offers." "What kind of offers?" "The kind where he cancels the debt if you marry him." Silence crashed down like a hammer on an anvil. "Absolutely not." "I told him the same, but he's persistent." Thomas met her eyes. "You've grown into a beautiful woman, Clara. Educated. Exactly the kind of wife a man like Marcus wants someone to polish up and show off like a prize mare." "I'm not marrying Marcus Dalton." "I know, but he doesn't take no easily." Clara stood pacing the small space. 8 years. She'd been gone 8 years building a life that was supposed to be better. And what did she have to show for it? the ability to conjugate French verbs, while her father lost everything. What about Ethan Sawyer? The words came out before she could stop them. Thomas looked surprised. What about him? Does he still live alone on his ranch? Her father's expression softened. Yes, exactly like he did when you left. Maybe more alone if that's possible. Clara's heart did something complicated. Relief and sorrow mixing together until she couldn't tell them apart. You really never forgot about him, Thomas said quietly. I promised I wouldn't. You were 14, honey. People don't hold children to promises like that. Maybe they should. Clara straightened her shoulders. I need to borrow your horse. Where are you going? But Clara was already heading for the door. The ride to Sawyer Ranch felt longer than Clara remembered. 8 years will do that, turn memory into something elastic, stretching and shrinking until you can't trust it anymore. But when the cabin appeared through the trees, it looked exactly the same. Small, weathered, smoke rising from a chimney that never quite stopped burning. Clara dismounted, her hands shaking. What was she doing, riding out to a man's ranch like some desperate fool? A man who probably didn't even remember the girl he'd saved from a blizzard. Why would he? She'd been one winter in a lifetime of winters. But the blue ribbon, her mother's ribbon, flashed in her memory. She'd given it to him, asked him to keep it as a promise. Had he? Before courage could desert her entirely, Clara walked to the door and knocked. Silence. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The door opened. Ethan Sawyer stood backlit by firelight, and Clara's breath stopped. He'd aged too, but where her father's aging seemed to diminish him, Ethan's only made him more solid, more real. Gray threaded his dark hair now. Lines around his eyes spoke of squinting into too many harsh suns. His shoulders were just as broad, but now they carried the weight of 8 more years of solitude. He stared at her like she'd appeared from a dream. Or a nightmare. Hard to tell which. Clara! His voice was rusty, disbelieving. Clara Bennett. I came back. Her voice shook. Like I said I would. For a long moment, Ethan just looked at her. Then so quietly she almost missed it. You really did. They stood there separated by a threshold, and 8 years, and all the promises that time should have erased. Finally, Ethan stepped back. You better come inside. Clara walked into Ethan Sawyer's cabin, and knew whatever came next, keeping her promise, was only the beginning. The cabin smelled the same wood smoke and leather and coffee that had been sitting too long on the stove. Clara stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a finality that made her pulse jump. Ethan didn't move far from the threshold. He stood with his back to the door, like he might need to escape his own home, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. You grew up, he said finally. You told me I would. Didn't think you'd come back. I told you I would. People say things. Ethan crossed to the stove, poured coffee into a tin cup with hands that weren't quite steady. Especially young people. They don't always mean them. I meant it. He turned to face her, and Clara saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. Not anger. Worse than that. Resignation. Like he'd spent 8 years expecting this moment and convincing himself it would never come. Why are you here, Clara? Because I promised. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. She took a step closer. I was 14 when I made that promise. Everyone told me I'd forget. My father, my aunt, every person in Boston who asked about my life back west. They all said the same thing: you were just a childhood fantasy. Something I'd outgrow, like believing in fairy tales. They were right. No. Clara's voice hardened. They weren't. I'm 22 years old, Ethan. I've had 8 years to forget you. I've met men with education and money and prospects. Men who know how to dance and make conversation and court properly. Do you know what I thought every time one of them tried? Ethan said nothing, just gripped his coffee cup like it might keep him anchored. I thought about a man who rode into a blizzard to check fence, who wrapped a frozen girl in his own coat, who asked for nothing in return. Clara's throat went tight. I thought about you living alone in this cabin, and I couldn't stand it. Not when I'd promised to come back. Clara. Ethan set the cup down with deliberate care. You don't owe me anything. I know. You saved yourself by staying alive long enough for me to find you. That's not what this is about. Then what? He took a step toward her, and another, until they were close enough that Clara could see the flecks of gray in his beard, the scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. What is this about you feeling guilty? Some misplaced sense of debt? No. Then what? I wanted to come back. The words burst out of her. Not because I had to. Not because I promised. I wanted to. Every single day I was gone, I wanted to be here instead. Ethan stared at her. You're telling me that in 8 years, with all of Boston at your feet, you wanted to be in Silverstone. I wanted to be wherever you were. The silence that followed felt loud enough to shatter windows. Ethan turned away, one hand coming up to grip the back of his neck. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because I'm 40 years old, Clara. 40. You're 22. That's 18 years. I can count. It's too much. Says who? Says everyone. He spun back to face her. Says every person in Silverstone who'll see us together and do the math. Says every part of me that knows better than to... He stopped, jaw working. To what? Clara challenged. To be happy, to not spend the rest of your life alone in this cabin. To take advantage of a girl young enough to be my daughter. I'm not a girl anymore. Clara closed the distance between them. And you didn't take advantage. I came here. I made the choice. A choice you'll regret. You don't get to decide that for me. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. Why are you really here, Clara? Your father write you about me. Tell you the lonely old cowboy needed charity. My father doesn't know I'm here. Clara's voice dropped. He had an accident. Hurt his hand. He can't work, and he owes money to Marcus Dalton's bank. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. How much? $500. He swore quietly. That's more than we have, more than we can get. Clara swallowed hard. Marcus offered to cancel the debt if I marry him. The temperature in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. What did you tell him? Ethan's voice went dangerously soft. What do you think I told him? I think you should tell me. I said no. I'll keep saying no. Clara met his eyes. But Marcus Dalton isn't a man who takes no for an answer. He's got money and influence and the bank. He can make my father's life very difficult if he wants to. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, how long until the debt's due? 3 months. And you came here because I wanted you to know I'm back. Because I meant what I said 8 years ago, and I mean it now. Clara pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper worn soft at the creases. You kept my mother's ribbon. I found it that night. You tucked it in your pocket, and I thought maybe that meant you believed me, even a little. Ethan looked at the paper in her hand. What's that? The letter I wrote you before I left for Boston. Did you ever get it? I got it. Did you read it? 3 times. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Then you know I meant to come back. Meaning to do something and doing it are different things. But Ethan's voice had lost its sharp edge. People change. Circumstances change. I didn't expect, I never thought. What, that I'd actually keep my promise? Yes. He said it simply brutally honest. I thought you'd grow up and realize what a foolish promise it was, made to a man twice your age by a girl who didn't know any better. I knew exactly what I was doing. You were 14. I was old enough to know my own heart. Clara stepped close enough to touch him if she wanted, close enough to feel the heat of him smell leather and soap and something indefinably Ethan. And I'm old enough now to stand here and tell you I came back for you. Not because of Marcus. Not because of my father's debt. For you. Ethan's breath caught. For just a second, his carefully maintained distance cracked. His hand lifted like he might touch her face, her hair something. Then he caught himself and stepped back. You should go. No. Clara. No. She planted her feet. I didn't ride all the way out here to be sent away. I came back to Silverstone. I'm staying. And you're going to have to get used to that. It's not appropriate. I don't care about appropriate. Clara's voice rose. I care about you. I've cared about you since I was 14 years old, and 8 years in Boston didn't change that. Nothing's going to change it. You don't know me, not really. You know a man who pulled you out of a snowbank. Then let me know you. She softened her tone. Let me come back, talk to you, just don't shut me out because you're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. Clara saw it in the way he held himself, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes for more than a second. You're terrified, because you didn't expect me to come back, and now that I'm here you don't know what to do. Ethan was silent. I'll go, Clara said quietly. But I'm coming back tomorrow, and the day after that, until you believe me. She walked to the door hand on the latch when his voice stopped her. Clara. She turned. Ethan stood in the middle of his cabin looking lost in a way that made her heart ache. That ribbon, your mother's ribbon. I've kept it in my pocket every day for 8 years. Wore out 2 coats, but I always transferred it. Clara's throat closed up. I kept it because... He stopped, started again. Because it was the only thing that made me think maybe I wasn't completely alone. Even if you never came back, even if it was just a child's promise, it mattered. I'm here now, Clara whispered. I know. Ethan's voice roughened. That's what scares me. Clara nodded slowly, then slipped out into the fading afternoon light, before the tears burning her eyes could fall. The ride back to Silverstone gave Clara time to think. Time to question every choice she'd made in the last 48 hours. Coming back west, going to Ethan's ranch, telling him things she'd barely admitted to herself. But by the time she returned her father's horse to the stable, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she wasn't giving up. Thomas was awake when she came in, sitting at the small table, with his bandaged hand resting in his lap. Where did you go? Sawyer Ranch. Her father's eyebrows rose. Did you now? Don't start. I didn't say anything. You're thinking it loud enough. Clara hung up her coat, suddenly exhausted. He thinks I'm making a mistake. Are you? No. Thomas studied her. You really never forgot him. I tried. God knows I tried. Aunt Josephine paraded every eligible bachelor in Boston past me. Some of them were nice, smart, handsome even. Clara sat across from her father. But none of them were him. Clara, honey, you know what people will say. I don't care. You should. Thomas's voice gentled. Not because I think they're right, but because it'll be hard, for both of you, especially in a town like this. Marcus Dalton's already making it hard. That's different. Marcus is... Her father's jaw tightened. He came by again today, asked when you'd be back from your ride. I didn't tell him where you went. Good. But he'll find out. He always does. Thomas reached across the table with his good hand. Be careful. Marcus isn't used to losing. Clara squeezed her father's hand. Neither am I. She went back to Sawyer Ranch the next day. Ethan was in the corral when she arrived, working with a young horse that clearly didn't want to be worked with. The gelding danced and snorted, but Ethan's hand stayed steady on the lead rope, his voice low and calm. Easy now. Nobody's trying to hurt you. Just getting you used to the feel of things. Clara leaned on the fence and watched. There was something almost hypnotic about it, the way Ethan moved, patient and unhurried, like he had all the time in the world to wait for the horse to trust him. Finally, he noticed her. The horse chose that moment to shy, and Ethan let him go, coiling the lead rope as the gelding trotted to the far side of the corral. "You're back." "I said I would be." Ethan climbed the fence and dropped down beside her. Sweat darkened his shirt, and there was dust on his boots and hay in his hair. He looked tired. Real. Nothing like the polished men of Boston who never got their hands dirty. "I'm training him for the Hendersons," Ethan said, gesturing at the gelding. "Their boy wants a horse for his 16th birthday. He's beautiful. He's stubborn." But there was affection in Ethan's voice. "Reminds me of someone." Clara smiled. "I'm not stubborn. I'm persistent. That what they teach you in Boston? Pretty words for difficult personality traits. They taught me lots of things. French, literature, how to pour tea without spilling." She paused. None of it felt as real as this. Ethan looked at her sidelong. "You planning to make this a habit? Coming out here?" "Yes." "Clara, I know what you're going to say. That it's not proper. That people will talk. That I should go find someone my own age." Clara turned to face him fully. "But I'm not going to do any of that. So you might as well get used to having me around." "You're impossible." "I'm right here." She said it gently. "Right here telling you I came back. That I want to be here. With you." "How many times do I have to say it before you believe me?" Ethan's jaw worked. "It's not about believing you." "Then what?" "It's about." He stopped, shoulders sagging. "What if you're wrong? What if you think you want this now, but 5 years from now you wake up and realize you tied yourself to an old man? You're not old. I'm 40, Clara. By the time you're 30, I'll be nearly 50. So you'll still be young, still beautiful, still have your whole life ahead of you. And I'll be—" He gestured helplessly at himself. "You'll be the man I chose," Clara said firmly. "The man I've wanted since I was 14 years old. Age is just a number, Ethan. It doesn't change who you are." "Doesn't it?" His voice went bitter. "I'm set in my ways, stubborn, not good at talking. I've been alone so long I barely know how to be around people anymore." "Then it's good I'm stubborn too." Clara reached out and did what she'd wanted to do yesterday, touched his face, her palm against his beard, rough and warm. "I'm not afraid of who you are. I'm afraid you'll push me away because you think you're not good enough." Ethan went very still. "Clara." "Let me in," she whispered. "Please, just let me try." For a long moment, Ethan just looked at her. Then slowly his hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "You're going to break my heart," he said quietly. "No." Clara's eyes stung. "I'm going to keep my promise." Ethan turned his face into her palm just slightly, and Clara felt the moment he stopped fighting. Felt him surrender to something he'd been denying for 8 years. "All right," he breathed. "All right." Clara smiled even as tears tracked down her face. "Yeah." "Yeah." Ethan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But we do this right. Proper. I court you. We take our time. Give people a chance to get used to the idea before—" "Before what?" His eyes met hers, and Clara saw everything she needed to see. "Before I ask you to marry me. For real this time. Not because a 14-year-old girl promised. Because I'm asking." "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet." But Ethan was almost smiling. "When I propose, you'll know." "I already know my answer." "That's what worries me." But his hand tightened on hers. "You sure about this? Really sure?" "I've been sure for 8 years." "Then I guess I better catch up." Clara laughed, and it felt like light breaking through clouds. Like the first warm day after a long winter. Like coming home. Ethan pulled his hand back, but gently. "You should go. People will talk if you're out here too long. Let them talk." Clara? Fine. She pushed off the fence. But I'm coming back tomorrow. I figured. And the day after that. Starting to see a pattern. Clara mounted her father's horse, then looked down at Ethan. He stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, squinting up at her against the sun, and she thought, this is the man I'm going to marry. Ethan. Yeah? Thank you. For keeping the ribbon. His expression softened. Thank you for coming back. Clara rode away feeling lighter than she had in 8 years. Behind her, Ethan Sawyer watched until she disappeared into the trees, one hand unconsciously touching the pocket where a blue ribbon had lived for nearly a decade. News traveled fast in Silverstone. By the end of the week, everyone knew Clara Bennett was riding out to Sawyer Ranch. Some people thought it was sweet, the girl who'd promised to marry her rescuer, all grown up and keeping her word. Others thought it was scandalous, a young woman pursuing an older man bold as brass. Marcus Dalton thought it was unacceptable. He cornered Clara outside the general store on Saturday morning. She was buying supplies for her father when Marcus appeared at her elbow too close, smiling like a cat with a cornered mouse. Miss Bennett, how lovely to see you back in town. Mr. Dalton. Clara kept her voice cool, professional. The voice Aunt Josephine had taught her for dealing with unwanted attention. I hear you've been spending time at Sawyer Ranch. I have. That's... Marcus paused, choosing his words. Concerning. A young woman of your education and refinement associating with a man like that. A man like what? Come now, you know what I mean? Sawyer's been alone so long he's practically feral. Lives like an animal out there. No refinement. No prospects beyond scratching out a living from that hardscrabble land. Clara set down the bag of flour she'd been examining. Mr. Dalton, I'm going to say this once as clearly as I can. What I do and who I spend time with is none of your concern. But it is my concern. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your father owes my bank a considerable sum. That makes you my concern. My father's debt has nothing to do with my personal life. Doesn't it? Marcus's smile turned sharp. I could make that debt disappear, Clara. Cancel it completely. All you'd have to do is... No. You didn't let me finish. I don't need to hear the rest. Clara picked up her flour. The answer is no. It will always be no. Even if my father loses everything, even if we end up living in a tent on the edge of town, the answer is still no. Marcus's pleasant expression cracked. You'd choose poverty over security, living in Sawyer's shack over a proper home in town. I'd choose love over a gilded cage. Clara met his eyes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have shopping to finish. She tried to move past him, but Marcus grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to stop her. You're making a mistake. Let go of me. People are talking, Clara, about you and Sawyer, about the age difference, about what it means that a woman your age is throwing herself at an old hermit. Marcus leaned in. It doesn't look good. For either of you. I don't care what it looks like. You should. His grip tightened fractionally. Because I can make those whispers louder. I can make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of woman would... The lady asked you to let go. Ethan's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Clara's head snapped up. Ethan stood 3 feet away, and the expression on his face made her stomach drop. Not angry, that would have been easier. This was colder, more dangerous. The kind of calm that came before violence. Marcus released Clara's arm and stepped back, but his smile never wavered. Sawyer, how convenient. We were just discussing you. Were you now? Ethan moved to Clara's side, not touching her, but close enough that his presence felt like a shield. Sounded more like you were threatening her. Threatening. That's a strong word. What would you call grabbing a woman's arm when she asked you to leave her alone? I was simply ensuring she heard me clearly. I heard you just fine, Clara said, finding her voice. And my answer stands. No. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked between them, and Clara saw the moment he made some kind of decision. I see how it is. Very well. But Miss Bennet, do remember your father's debt comes due in 10 weeks. When you're scrambling to find that money, don't come crying to me. He tipped his hat in a mockery of politeness and walked away. Clara's hands were shaking. She didn't realize it until Ethan gently took the flower from her and set it on the counter. You all right? I'm fine. Clara, I'm fine, she insisted, but her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan's hand hovered near her elbow. Come on, let's get you home. I have shopping. I'll come back for it later. He glanced around at the handful of people who'd witnessed the confrontation, all pretending they hadn't. Right now, you need to not be here. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stand her ground and prove she wasn't rattled. But Ethan was right. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the walls of the general store suddenly felt too close. She let him guide her outside. They walked in silence to the blacksmith shop. Thomas looked up from the ledger he'd been studying with his good hand, took one look at Clara's face and stood. What happened? Marcus Dalton happened, Ethan said. Thomas swore. What did he do? Nothing I couldn't handle, Clara said quickly. He grabbed my arm, tried to threaten me about the debt. He put his hands on you. Thomas's voice went dangerously quiet. I'm fine, Papa. That's not what I asked. Ethan stepped forward. It's handled. I made sure he understood that touching her again would be a mistake. Thomas looked between them. And what happens when you're not around Ethan? When he corners her again and nobody's there to intervene? That won't happen. You can't know that. Then I'll make sure I'm around. Ethan's jaw set. If Clara's willing, I'll escort her into town. Make sure Dalton understands she's not alone. That'll just fan the flames, Thomas warned. People are already talking. Let them talk. Clara found her voice. This isn't your fight, Ethan. Yes, it is. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. You made it my fight when you came back. When you... He stopped, glanced at Thomas, then continued more carefully. When you made your intentions clear. That makes your problems my problems. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. Ethan's voice gentled. You think I'm going to sit out at the ranch while Dalton harasses you? Think I'm going to let him use your father's debt to manipulate you? What choice do we have? Clara's frustration boiled over. He owns the debt. He has the power. Unless we find $500 in the next 10 weeks, my father loses everything. Then we find $500. How I have maybe 100 from my inheritance. Father can't work. We can't. I can. Silence fell like snow. Clara stared at Ethan. What? I can loan you the money, pay off Dalton's bank. Thomas can pay me back when he's healed and working again. Ethan, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He turned to Thomas. I've got savings. Enough to cover the debt and then some. Take it. Get Dalton off your back. Thomas looked stunned. That's your entire safety net. What if you have a bad year? What if something happens to your stock? Then I'll manage. I always have. Ethan's voice was firm. But I won't stand by and let Dalton use debt as a weapon. Take the money. We can't accept charity, Clara said, even as hope bloomed painful in her chest. It's not charity. It's a loan. Ethan met her eyes. Call it an investment. In your father's business. He hesitated. In our future. Clara's breath caught. Our future. If you'll have it. Ethan looked suddenly uncertain, like maybe he'd said too much. If you still mean what you said. About keeping your promise. I mean it. Clara's voice came out stronger than she felt. I've always meant it. Thomas cleared his throat. You two mind if I say something? They both turned to him. Ethan, that's one hell of an offer. More generous than I deserve considering I barely know you beyond a handful of horseshoe orders over the years. Thomas's good hand gripped the table edge. But if you're doing this because you're courting my daughter, I need to know your intentions are honorable. They are. Meaning I'm asking your permission to court Clara properly, with the aim of marriage, if she'll have me. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Thomas studied Ethan for a long moment. You're 40 years old. I am. That's 18 years older than my daughter. I know. People will talk. Probably already are. I know that too. And you think you can make her happy long term, not just now while everything's new and exciting, but 10 years down the road when the shine wears off. Ethan's voice went quiet but certain. I think I'll spend every day trying to. Can't promise I won't fail sometimes. Can't promise it'll be easy. But I can promise I'll never stop trying. Thomas was quiet. Then, Clara, what do you think? I think... Clara's throat closed up. She swallowed hard and tried again. I think I've been waiting 8 years for someone to ask me that question. And my answer is yes. You're sure? Her father's eyes searched hers. Really sure. Because once you start down this road, people won't let you forget. They'll remind you every day that you chose an older man, question your judgment, wonder if you're making a mistake. I'm sure. Clara looked at Ethan and everything else faded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Thomas nodded slowly. Then you have my blessing. Both of you. He stood cross to Ethan and held out his good hand. But Ethan, you hurt her and Blacksmith's bad hand or not, I'll find a way to make you regret it. Ethan shook his hand. If I hurt her, I'll deserve whatever you do to me. Good, then we understand each other. Thomas's expression softened. Now about that loan. No conditions, Ethan said firmly. Pay me back when you can, or don't. Either way, the offer stands. I'll pay you back, Thomas said. Every penny, with interest. No interest. Just take care of that hand. Get better. That's payment enough. Clara watched this exchange feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. An hour ago, she'd been cornered by Marcus Dalton, her father's debt hanging over them like a guillotine. Now, Ethan Sawyer, the man she'd promised to marry 8 years ago, was offering to pay that debt, was asking permission to court her, was talking about marriage like it was real and possible, and not just a 14-year-old's fantasy. I should get back to the ranch, Ethan said, but he looked at Clara like he was asking permission to leave. I'll walk you to your horse. Outside, Buck was tied to the hitching post patient as ever. Ethan checked the saddle cinch, buying himself time before he had to say goodbye. That was... Clara started, then laughed shakily. I don't even know what that was. Me either. Ethan's hands stilled on the saddle. Might have overstepped. Your father's debt isn't my business. You made it your business. Yeah. He turned to face her. I did. Clara closed the distance between them. Thank you. For the money. For standing up to Marcus. For, her voice caught, for asking my father's permission. Seemed like the right thing to do. It was. Clara reached up, cupping his face the way she'd wanted to since she first saw him again. You're a good man, Ethan Sawyer? Trying to be. His hand covered hers, holding it against his cheek. For you, anyway. So this is really happening. We're courting. If you want to. I want to. Clara smiled, feeling lighter than air. I want everything. Courting, marriage, a life with you. All of it. Ethan's expression softened into something that looked almost like wonder. 8 years ago, if someone told me that scared frozen girl would grow up and come back, that she'd look at me like you're looking at me right now, I'd have called them crazy. Good thing I'm stubborn. Good thing. Ethan leaned down, and for a second Clara thought he might kiss her, but instead he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in like he needed to confirm she was real. I'm going to try to deserve you. You already do. Let me try anyway. Clara smiled against his skin. Okay. They stood like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air. Then Ethan pulled back, climbed onto Buck, and looked down at her. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, Clara confirmed. And the day after that. Starting to really see that pattern now. She laughed and watched him ride away, one hand raised in farewell, until he disappeared around the bend. Behind her, Thomas Bennett stood in the doorway of his shop, watching his daughter watch the man she'd promised to marry. And for the first time in months since the accident, since the debt, since all the worry that kept him up at night, he felt something like hope. Maybe promises made by 14-year-old girls weren't so foolish after all. Maybe sometimes, against all odds, they came true. The next 3 weeks passed like a dream Clara was afraid to wake from. Every morning she rode to Sawyer Ranch, and every morning Ethan was waiting. Sometimes he'd be working in the corral, sometimes mending fence, sometimes just standing on the porch with 2 cups of coffee, like he'd known the exact moment she'd arrive. They'd talk about everything and nothing. About her years in Boston and his years alone. About horses and weather and all the small things that make up a life. And every evening, when she rode back to town, she felt Ethan's eyes on her until she disappeared from sight. But Silverstone was watching too. Sarah Morgan stopped Clara outside the church on Sunday, her expression carefully neutral. People are talking, dear. Let them. I'm not saying I agree with them. Sarah glanced around to make sure they were alone. But you should know what's being said. Some folks think Ethan's taking advantage. Others think you're being foolish, throwing yourself at a man old enough to be your father. He's not old enough to be my father. That's mathematically impossible. You know what I mean. Clara softened her tone. I appreciate the warning, Sarah, but I know what I'm doing. Do you? Sarah's voice dropped. Because Marcus Dalton's been talking too. Saying things. About how Ethan can't possibly support a wife. How he's been alone so long he's forgotten how to be civilized. How it's only a matter of time before you come to your senses. Marcus can say whatever he wants. He's also saying he'll foreclose on your father's shop the day that debt comes due. No extensions, no negotiations. Sarah touched Clara's arm. I'm telling you this as a friend. Be careful. Marcus doesn't forgive easily, and he's got the whole town bank in his pocket. Clara's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. Ethan's lending us the money. The debt will be paid. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Is that wise, having Ethan involved financially? He insisted. I'm sure he did. Sarah's expression was hard to read. Just be sure you're not trading one debt for another. Different chains are still chains. She walked away before Clara could respond. That conversation sat heavy in Clara's chest all through Sunday dinner. Her father noticed, he always noticed, but didn't push. Just squeezed her shoulder as he passed and said, Don't let them get in your head. But they were already there whispering doubts that sounded too much like her own fears. What if Sarah was right? What if accepting Ethan's help meant owing him something she couldn't repay? What if the whole town turned against them? She rode to the ranch Monday morning, determined to talk about it. Found Ethan in the barn mucking stalls with the kind of methodical efficiency that suggested he'd been doing it since before dawn. You're early, he said, not looking up from the pitchfork. Couldn't sleep. Now he looked up, took one look at her face, and set the pitchfork aside. What's wrong? People are talking. They've been talking since you came back. I know, but... Clara crossed her arms. Sarah Morgan said Marcus is telling everyone you can't support a wife, that you're taking advantage of me, that I'm making a mistake. Ethan's jaw tightened. And what do you think? I think... Clara stopped, frustrated with herself. I think I don't want you paying my father's debt if it means people will say I'm marrying you for money. Is that what you're doing? No. Then why does it matter what they say? Because it does. Her voice rose despite herself. Because I don't want people thinking you bought me, or that I'm using you, Or that this whole thing is just some transaction. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the barn door and closed it, shutting out the morning sun. When he turned back, his expression was serious. "Come here." Clara didn't move. "Ethan, please." She went to him. He caught her hands, his rough and calloused, hers soft, from 8 years of city living, and held them between them like an anchor. "Listen to me. I don't care what Marcus Dalton says. I don't care what the whole town thinks. The only person whose opinion matters is yours." His thumbs brushed across her knuckles. "So I'm asking you straight, do you want to marry me because I'm helping your father? Or do you want to marry me because you actually want to?" "I want to marry you," Clara said without hesitation. "I've wanted that since I was 14. "Then nothing else matters." Ethan pulled her closer. "People will always talk. About the age difference. About how fast we're moving. About everything. We can't control that. All we can control is knowing the truth ourselves." "And what's the truth?" "The truth is, I've been alone in this barn for 15 years, and I've never wanted to share it with anyone until you walked back into my life." His voice roughened. "The truth is, I'd pay your father's debt 10 times over if it meant keeping you safe from Marcus Dalton's schemes. Not because I'm buying you, because I—" He stopped, jaw working. Clara's heart hammered. "Because what?" "Because I love you." The words came out rough, like they'd been locked up so long he'd forgotten how to say them. "I loved that 14-year-old girl who promised to marry me. And I love the woman she became. The one who came back when she didn't have to. The one who's stubborn enough to keep showing up here every morning even though half the town thinks she's crazy." Clara's eyes burned. "You love me?" "Yeah." Ethan looked almost embarrassed. "Probably have since you gave me that ribbon. Spent 8 years trying to convince myself it was just, I don't know, loneliness. But then you came back and I knew. It was always you." "I love you too." Clara's voice cracked. "I've loved you for 8 years. Through every dance I turned down every man who tried to court me. I loved you." Ethan made a sound low in his throat and pulled her against him. His arms came around her like iron bands, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Clara buried her face in his chest and felt his heart pounding against her cheek. "We're going to be all right," he murmured into her hair. "Let them talk. Let Marcus scheme. None of it matters." "What if—" Clara's voice muffled against his shirt. "What if your ranch has a bad year? What if you can't afford?" "Then we'll figure it out together." He pulled back just enough to see her face. "That's what marriage is, isn't it? Figuring things out together. Is that a proposal?" "Not yet." But Ethan was almost smiling. "When I propose it'll be proper, not in a barn that smells like horse manure." Clara laughed, despite the tears on her face. "I wouldn't care if you proposed in a pig pen." "I know. That's why I'm going to do better than a pig pen." He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears. "Trust me. With my life. Then trust me with this, with us, with everything people are saying." Clara nodded, and Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. Soft, gentle. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise all on its own. They stood like that, wrapped in each other, until Buck whinnied from his stall and reminded them the world still existed outside the barn. That evening, Clara returned to town with her head high and her heart settled. Let people talk. Let Marcus scheme. She knew the truth, and that was enough. But Marcus Dalton wasn't finished. 2 days later, Thomas received a letter from the bank. Clara found him staring at it in the shop, his face ashen. "Papa, what is it?" He handed her the letter without a word. Clara read it once, then again, her stomach dropping with each word. The bank was calling in the debt early. Due in 2 weeks instead of the original 3 months. Full payment required or immediate foreclosure proceedings would begin. "He can't do this," Clara breathed. "He can. It's in the contract. I was desperate when I signed it, Clara. I didn't read the fine print about early collection. But why now? Because of Ethan. Thomas's voice went flat. Marcus knows he's planning to pay the debt. He's calling it in before Ethan can arrange the funds. Clara crumpled the letter in her fist. This is my fault. If I'd just stayed away from Ethan. Don't. Her father gripped her shoulder with his good hand. Don't you dare blame yourself. Marcus would have found another excuse. Men like him always do. What are we going to do? I don't know. Clara rode to Sawyer Ranch faster than was probably safe. Found Ethan working on the roof replacing shingles damaged by winter storms. He climbed down the moment he saw her face. What happened? She thrust the crumpled letter at him. Ethan read it, his expression darkening with each line. Son of a bitch. Can you get the money together in 2 weeks? I don't know. Most of my savings are tied up in livestock. I'd have to sell. He stopped calculating. Maybe, if I sold half my herd at auction. But prices are low right now. I'd take a loss. Don't. Clara's voice shook. Don't sell your herd for this, for me. Clara? No, listen. She forced herself to stay calm. If you sell at a loss, you'll ruin yourself. And Marcus will have won anyway. He'll have destroyed both of us. What are you suggesting? Clara's throat went tight. Maybe I should talk to him. See if there's another way. Absolutely not. Ethan's voice went hard as steel. You're not going anywhere near him. What choice do I have if we can't pay? We'll find a way. He gripped her shoulders. We'll find another way. I'll talk to the other ranchers. See if anyone can buy cattle now, pay later, or I'll... He stopped, jaw clenching. I'll figure something out. In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. But Clara saw the doubt in his eyes. Saw the same fear that was clawing at her own chest. 2 weeks wasn't enough time. Not to sell cattle at a fair price. Not to raise $500 from nothing. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small room. Through the thin wall, she could hear her father's labored breathing. He wasn't sleeping either. Outside, Silverstone was quiet, except for the occasional bark of a dog or creak of a building settling. She thought about her mother buried 6 years. Thought about the promise she'd made standing at that grave that she'd take care of Papa no matter what. Thought about Ethan alone in his ranch, probably lying awake too, trying to figure out how to save them both. And she thought about Marcus Dalton, sitting in his fine house, probably sleeping like a baby, because he knew he'd won. The idea came to her slowly, like dawn breaking. Terrible and desperate, and the only option she could see. She got up, dressed quietly, and slipped out before her father could wake and ask where she was going. The Dalton house sat on the hill overlooking Silverstone, 3 stories of wood and brick that announced its owner's wealth to anyone with eyes. Clara stood at the gate as the sun rose, gathering courage she didn't feel. Then she walked up to the front door and knocked. A housekeeper answered, middle-aged woman with tired eyes and flour on her apron. I need to speak with Mr. Dalton. It's early, miss. He doesn't usually. Tell him Clara Bennett is here. He'll see me. The housekeeper looked uncertain, but went inside. A few minutes later, Marcus appeared in the doorway dressed for the day and looking entirely too pleased. Miss Bennett, what a delightful surprise. We need to talk. By all means, come in. Clara hesitated at the threshold. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, run back to her father, tell Ethan what she was doing. But she thought about Thomas's bandaged hand, about Ethan selling his herd at a loss, about losing everything because she'd been selfish enough to come back and think she could have a happy ending. She stepped inside. Marcus led her to his study, all leather and dark wood and books that looked expensive but unread. He gestured to a chair, but Clara remained standing. I'll make this quick. I know why you called in the debt early. Do you... You're trying to force my hand, make it impossible for Ethan to help us. Clara kept her voice level. It's working. He can't raise the money in 2 weeks. Not without ruining himself. I'm simply conducting business. You're conducting revenge. Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. So here's what I'm proposing. Cancel the early collection. Give us back the original timeline. 3 months. And in exchange, Clara's fingernails bit into her palms. I'll have dinner with you, one dinner, to discuss the possibility of... The words stuck in her throat. Of reconsidering your proposal. Marcus's smile spread slow and triumphant. One dinner to discuss marriage. To discuss the possibility. I'm not promising anything beyond that. But you're open to persuasion. Every part of her wanted to scream no, to tell him she'd rather starve than marry him. But she thought about her father, about Ethan, about the people she loved paying the price for her choices. I'm open to a conversation. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he moved to his desk and pulled out the contract, dipped his pen in ink and made a notation. Very well. Original timeline reinstated, 3 months from the date of signing. And you'll stop trying to manipulate the situation. I'll conduct business fairly. His smile never wavered. As long as you keep your end of the bargain. Dinner. Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. Wear something nice. Clara's stomach rolled. Fine. Excellent. Marcus walked her to the door. Oh, and Miss Bennet. Come alone. If Sawyer or your father try to interfere, the deal's off and the debt comes due immediately. They won't know. See that they don't. Clara walked back to town feeling like she'd sold her soul. Maybe she had. But she'd bought time. That's what mattered. Time for Ethan to find another solution. Time for her father to heal. Time for anything except the immediate disaster Marcus had been orchestrating. She just had to get through one dinner. One conversation. Then she'd figure out how to get free of this new trap she'd walked into. Thomas was awake when she returned, sitting at the breakfast table with the letter still in front of him. Where did you go? Just for a walk. Needed to clear my head. The lie tasted like ash. Any luck? Maybe. Clara poured coffee with shaking hands. I'm working on something, but I need you to trust me. Clara, what did you do? Nothing yet, I promise. She set down the cup before she could spill it. Just trust me, please. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. All right, I trust you. Clara wished she trusted herself. She didn't ride to Sawyer Ranch that day. Couldn't face Ethan knowing what she'd agreed to. Instead, she spent the day helping her father in the shop, pretending everything was fine, fighting the urge to vomit every time she thought about tomorrow night. Evening came too fast. Clara stood in front of her small mirror, wearing the nicest dress she owned, blue silk, she'd brought from Boston, saved for special occasions. She looked like someone going to a party. Felt like someone going to her execution. You look beautiful, Thomas said from the doorway. Where are you going? Just dinner, in town. With who? Clara couldn't meet his eyes. A friend. Clara. I'll be back late, don't wait up. She left before he could ask more questions. The walk to the Dalton house felt like walking through water, every step harder than the last. By the time she reached the gate, Clara's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together to hide it. Marcus met her at the door, dressed in evening clothes that probably cost more than her father made in 6 months. You came. I gave my word. So you did. He offered his arm. Shall we? Clara took it because she had to and let him lead her to the dining room. The table was set for 2 with china so fine, Clara was afraid to touch it. Candles flickered. Wine sat breathing in crystal glasses. It would have been romantic if it didn't feel like a cage closing around her. Please sit. Clara sat. Marcus took the chair across from her, too close even with the table between them. I'm glad you came to your senses. I came to have a conversation, that's all. Of course. Marcus poured wine. But surely you see the logic in what I'm proposing. Your father's business saved. financial security, a position of respect in town. Everything Sawyer can't offer you. Ethan offers me love. Love. Marcus said it like it was quaint, amusing. Love doesn't pay debts, Clara. It doesn't put food on the table or keep a roof over your head. It's still worth more than money. Is it, when you're watching your father lose everything? When Sawyer's ranch fails because he bankrupted himself trying to save you? Marcus leaned forward. I can prevent all of that. Say yes and your father's debt disappears. I'll even help Sawyer buy his cattle at a fair price so he doesn't take a loss. Everyone wins. Except me. You'd have everything you could want. I'd have everything except the man I love. Marcus's pleasant expression finally cracked. What is it about him? He's nearly twice your age. Lives alone like a hermit. Has nothing to offer except what memories of saving you from a blizzard 8 years ago. He has himself. Clara's voice strengthened. That's more than enough. You're being a fool. Maybe, but I'm being an honest fool. She stood. I shouldn't have come. This was a mistake. Sit down. Marcus's voice went cold. We had an agreement. To talk. We talked. You agreed to discuss marriage. I am discussing it. My answer is no. Then our deal is off. The debt comes due in 2 weeks. I know. Clara moved toward the door. But I'd rather lose everything than spend one more minute pretending this could ever work. She was 3 steps from the door when Marcus caught her arm. Harder than before. Hard enough to bruise. You're making a very stupid choice. Let go of me. You think Sawyer can protect you? He can barely protect himself. Marcus pulled her back. One word from me, and I'll make sure every rancher in Wyoming knows not to buy his cattle. He'll lose everything trying to save you. Then he'll lose everything. Clara wrenched her arm free. But he'll do it knowing I chose him. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. She walked out, heart pounding, half expecting Marcus to follow. But he didn't. Just stood in his expensive dining room and watched her go with an expression that promised this wasn't over. Clara made it halfway down the hill before her legs gave out. She sat on the side of the road, dress getting dusty, and let herself shake. What had she done? She'd meant to buy time. Instead, she'd made everything worse. Marcus would call the debt immediately now. Would make sure Ethan couldn't sell his cattle. Would destroy them both just to prove he could. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the sun to set. Long enough for the first stars to appear. Long enough that she didn't hear the horse until it was almost on top of her. Clara looked up. Ethan sat on buck expression carved from granite in the fading light. Get up. Clara stood on shaking legs. How did you... Your father told me where you went. His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Get on the horse. Ethan, I can explain. Get on the horse. Clara climbed up. Ethan's arm came around her waist like iron, and then they were moving, but not toward town. Where are we going? My ranch. Ethan, not now. His voice was still that careful, controlled tone. Not until we're somewhere. I'm not likely to ride back up that hill and do something I'll regret. Clara fell silent. Let him guide Buck through the darkness. Let his arm hold her steady even though every part of her was shaking. They reached the ranch. Ethan swung down and lifted her after him, hands spanning her waist. Then he just stood there, holding her, breathing hard. Did he hurt you? No. Did he touch you? He grabbed my arm. That's all. Ethan's hands tightened fractionally. Show me. Clara rolled up her sleeve. Even in the dim light from the cabin, the bruises were visible, 5 distinct finger marks. Ethan made a sound low and dangerous in his throat. It's fine. I'm fine. You went to him. Ethan's voice shook. You went to Marcus Dalton and made some kind of deal. I was trying to help, by offering yourself as payment. He finally let go of her, stepping back like he couldn't trust himself. What were you thinking? I was thinking I couldn't watch everyone I love lose everything because of me. So your solution was to sell yourself to the man who's been trying to own you since you came back. I wasn't selling myself, I thought if I could talk to him, make him see reason. Marcus Dalton doesn't see reason, he sees opportunities to win. Ethan's voice rose. And you walked right into his house and handed him the biggest opportunity he could want. What was I supposed to do? Let him destroy my father, let you bankrupt yourself. There were no good options. The good option was trusting me. Ethan's control finally shattered. Trusting that I'd find a way, that we'd figure it out together. Instead, you went behind my back and played right into his hands. Clara's eyes burned. I was scared. So was I. You think I'm not terrified every day that I'll lose you, that you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake? His voice cracked. But I trust you anyway. Trust that you mean what you say. Trust that we're in this together. And then you go, and... He turned away, one hand coming up to grip the back of his neck. Did you even think about how I'd feel? Finding out the woman I love went to another man's house, alone at night. Nothing happened. That's not the point. He spun back to face her. The point is, you didn't trust me enough to tell me what you were planning. You made a choice that affects both of us without including me in it. How is that supposed to work in a marriage? I don't know. Clara's tears finally spilled over. I don't know how any of this works. I've never done this before. I'm making it up as I go, and I know I'm doing it badly, but I'm trying, Ethan. I'm trying so hard not to be the burden that ruins everyone's life. You're not a burden. His voice gentled. You've never been a burden. Then why does everything fall apart when I'm involved? My father gets hurt. You have to sell your cattle. Marcus calls in the debt early. It's all because of me. None of that is your fault. It feels like it is. Ethan closed the distance between them and pulled her against him. Listen to me. Marcus Dalton is responsible for Marcus Dalton's actions. Your father's accident was an accident, and I'm selling cattle because I choose to, not because I have to, because I want to. His hand came up to cup the back of her head. Stop trying to save everyone by yourself. That's not how this works. Clara cried into his chest, 8 years of held-back tears finally breaking free. Ethan just held her one hand stroking her hair, murmuring things she couldn't quite hear, but felt anyway. When she finally quieted, he pulled back just enough to see her face. We're going to fix this. Together. How? I don't know yet, but we will. He brushed tears off her cheeks. But Clara, no more secret deals. No more going to Marcus alone. If we're doing this, we do it as a team. Understand? Clara nodded. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Yeah, you should have. But his voice had lost its anger. But I'm sorry too, for yelling, for making you feel like you had to handle everything alone. You didn't. I did. Ethan's forehead touched hers. I've been alone so long I forgot how to let someone else carry weight. Forgot that relationships mean sharing burdens, not just... He stopped, then continued quietly. I'm learning too. How to be an us instead of just a me. Give me time to figure it out. If you give me time to stop being stupid. Deal. He almost smiled. Now come inside. It's cold and you're shaking. They went into the cabin. Ethan built up the fire while Clara sat wrapped in a blanket, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. When he finished, he sat beside her and pulled her against his side. Your father knows you're here. He'll worry. I'll ride into town later. Let him know you're safe. You don't have to. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. Ethan's arm tightened around her. Not after. He didn't finish. Clara understood anyway. Not after Marcus. Not after she'd put herself in danger. Not after he'd spent the last few hours imagining the worst. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn. Finally, Clara spoke. "What are we going to do about the debt?" "Tomorrow I'm riding to every ranch within 50 miles. Someone will buy cattle. Has to be. And if they don't, then we'll figure out Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Ethan was quiet. "I don't know yet, but there's always another option. Always." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would work out. But sitting in his arms, safe and warm, while the darkness pressed against the windows, she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Dalton was out there planning his next move. And this time, he wouldn't be satisfied with just money. This time, he'd want blood. Morning came too early and too bright. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, disoriented for a moment before remembering she'd fallen asleep on Ethan's sofa, wrapped in blankets that smelled like wood smoke and safety. Through the window, dawn painted the mountains pink and gold, beautiful in a way that felt almost cruel, given everything hanging over their heads. Ethan stood at the stove, already dressed, hair still damp from washing. He turned when he heard her move. "Morning. How'd you sleep?" "Better than I should have." Clara sat up, trying to smooth her wrinkled dress. "What time is it?" "Just past 6. I'm heading out soon. Want to catch the ranchers before they start their day's work." He brought her coffee in a chipped mug. "Drink this. Then I'm taking you home." "I can ride myself." "Not negotiable." His tone left no room for argument. "After last night, I'm not letting you go anywhere alone until this mess with Marcus is settled." Clara wanted to protest, wanted to say she could take care of herself. But the bruises on her arm were turning purple in the morning light, and she remembered the look on Marcus's face when she'd walked out. Ethan was right. This wasn't over. They rode into Silverstone together as the sun cleared the mountains. People were just starting to stir, shopkeepers opening doors, the blacksmith's forge already glowing. Clara felt eyes tracking them as they passed, felt the weight of judgment and speculation. Let them look. She was past caring. Thomas was waiting at the shop, face drawn with worry that shifted to relief when he saw Clara. Then his eyes went to Ethan, and something else flickered there. Understanding, maybe. Or approval. "You kept her safe." "Always will." Ethan helped Clara dismount, his hand lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I'm riding out. Won't be back until late. She stays in town today. Doesn't go anywhere alone." "Ethan, I'm not a child." "No, you're a woman who walked into Marcus Dalton's house last night and nearly gave me a heart attack." He turned to face her fully. "You stay in town. You stay safe. That's the deal." Clara opened her mouth to argue, saw the fear beneath his firmness, and closed it again. "Fine. Promise me." "I promise." Ethan nodded, then looked back at Thomas. "Keep an eye on her, and if Marcus comes around, I've got my shotgun." Thomas's voice was grim. "He sets foot in here, he'll regret it." "Good." Ethan mounted Buck again, looked down at Clara with an expression that made her chest tight. "I'll fix this." "I know." He rode out before she could say anything else, and Clara stood watching until he disappeared around the bend toward the north road where the big ranches sprawled across the territory. Thomas touched her shoulder. "Come inside. We need to talk." The shop was warm from the forge, comforting in its familiarity. Clara sat on the stool she'd sat on as a girl watching her father work and felt about 14 years old again, lost and scared and trying to be braver than she felt. "You want to tell me what happened last night?" Thomas asked quietly. So Clara told him. All of it. The deal she'd tried to make. The dinner, Marcus's threats, walking out and Ethan finding her. By the time she finished, her father's face had gone through about 6 different shades of emotion. "Clara Marie Bennett." His voice shook. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I couldn't watch you lose everything." "So you were willing to sell yourself instead?" "I wasn't selling." Clara stopped. That's exactly what she'd been doing. "I didn't know what else to do." Thomas limped over and gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. This shop, this business, this debt, None of it is worth your happiness. None of it. If I lose everything tomorrow, I'll rebuild. But I can't rebuild you. Can't fix it if you sacrifice yourself for me. Papa. Your mother would be ashamed of me if she knew I'd let you even consider marrying Marcus Dalton. His voice cracked. She'd tell me the same thing I'm telling you now. We'll survive. We always have. But not if it cost you your future. Clara's throat closed. I'm scared. I know. Me too. He pulled her into a hug, awkward with his bandaged hand but fierce anyway. But Ethan's right. We figure this out together. No more lone hero nonsense from either of us. They spent the morning working side by side. Thomas couldn't do heavy smithing, but he could tend the fire, organize tools, handle the bookkeeping he'd been neglecting. Clara swept and cleaned her mind, only half on the work, the other half tracking time. Wondering which ranch Ethan had reached, whether anyone would buy cattle on short notice, whether they had a chance in hell of making this work. Around noon, Sarah Morgan appeared in the doorway. Clara, can we talk? Clara set down her broom. Of course. They stepped outside into the midday sun. Sarah glanced around to make sure they were alone, then spoke quickly. Marcus came by the house this morning, talking to Jake, asking if there were grounds to arrest Ethan Sawyer. Clara's stomach dropped. For what? Corruption of a minor, he said. Something about Ethan making promises to you when you were underage. Sarah's expression was tight. Jake told him he was fishing in an empty creek. Said there was no crime in a 14-year-old girl making a foolish promise, and no crime in a grown man being kind enough to let her down easy. Except Ethan didn't let me down easy. No, he kept that promise close for 8 years, didn't he? Sarah's voice softened. Look, Clara, I know I warned you before, about people talking. But after what I heard this morning, Marcus is dangerous. He's not going to stop until he destroys Ethan or gets you. Maybe both. I know. Then you need to be smarter than him. You and Ethan both. Sarah glanced over her shoulder. Jake thinks Marcus is planning something. Don't know what, but he's been meeting with his men, the ones who do his dirty work when legal methods don't pan out. Clara's blood went cold. You think I think Marcus Dalton is used to getting what he wants. And right now he wants you and he wants Ethan gone. Sarah gripped Clara's hand. Be careful, both of you. And if anything happens, anything at all, you come straight to us. Jake will help. I know he's supposed to stay neutral, but he's not blind to what Marcus is. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just stay safe. Sarah squeezed once and let go. And Clara. For what it's worth, I think you and Ethan make sense. Age doesn't matter when the feelings are real. She left before Clara could respond. The afternoon dragged. Every hour that passed without word from Ethan felt like a year. Clara tried to stay busy, tried not to think about Marcus and his men, tried not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. But her hands shook every time she picked something up, and Thomas noticed. He'll be fine. You don't know that. I know Ethan Sawyer's been surviving on his own for 15 years. Man like that doesn't go down easy. Thomas touched her shoulder. Have faith. Clara tried. But faith felt like a luxury when reality kept pressing in from all sides. Dusk was falling when the rider appeared. Not Ethan. Jesse Pike, one of the ranch hands who worked roundup for half the territory. He dismounted fast and nearly ran into the shop. Clara, your father. You need to come, now. Clara's heart stopped. What happened? It is Ethan. They said there was a fight, up at the Morrison Ranch. He's hurt. The world tilted. How bad? Don't know. Morrison sent me to fetch you. Said Ethan was asking for you before. Jesse stopped. You should come. Clara was moving before thought caught up. Thomas grabbed her arm. I'm coming with you. Papa, you can't ride. I'm coming. No room for argument. Jesse, get the wagon. The ride to Morrison Ranch took 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. Clara's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Ethan hurt, Ethan bleeding, Ethan asking for her, which meant he was conscious, but also meant something bad enough had happened that he needed to see her. Morrison Ranch appeared through the twilight lamplight spilling from the windows. Frank Morrison met them at the door, his expression grim. "He's inside. Doc's with him now." Clara pushed past without ceremony, found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, shirt off, the doctor stitching a gash across his ribs. His face was bruised, lips, split knuckles, bloody, but he was upright, conscious, alive. Relief hit her so hard she nearly fell. Ethan looked up, saw her, and something eased in his expression. "Clara." "What happened?" She crossed to him, hands hovering, wanting to touch but afraid to hurt him. "Marcus's men." Ethan's voice was rough. "3 of them. Jumped me on the road back from the Hendricks place." The doctor, old Doc Rafferty, who'd been stitching up ranch hands since before Clara was born, tied off the thread and stepped back. "You're lucky. That knife could have gone a lot deeper. As it is, you'll be sore for a few weeks, but nothing's permanently damaged." "Knife?" Clara's voice cracked. "One of them had a blade. Got me before I got him." Ethan winced as he reached for his shirt. Other 2 ran when Morrison and his boys heard the commotion. Frank Morrison spoke from the doorway. "Found him on the North Road, 3 men on foot, horses scattered. Ethan was well holding his own, but barely. We chased the others off, brought him here." "Did you see who they were?" Thomas asked. "Wore masks, but I recognized one by his walk. Pete Garrison. Works for Marcus at the bank." Morrison's jaw set. This was planned. They were waiting for him. Clara's hands clenched into fists. "Where is he? Where's Marcus?" "Clara, no." Ethan reached for her, winced. "He tried to have you killed." "We don't know that for sure." "The hell we don't." Clara's voice rose. "Sarah warned me this morning. Said Marcus was planning something. And now you're sitting here bleeding because his men ambushed you. Which is exactly why you're not going anywhere near him." Ethan's voice went hard. "You think I'm letting you within a mile of that man after this? Someone has to—" "No." He stood swaying slightly and caught her shoulders. "No. We do this smart. We do this legal. Sheriff Morgan." "Can't do anything without proof," Thomas finished quietly. "And Garrison will deny everything. Marcus will have alibis lined up. We all know how this works." Silence fell heavy, because Thomas was right. In a town where Marcus Dalton owned the bank and half the businesses depended on his goodwill, proof meant nothing. Money talked louder. "So what do we do?" Clara asked finally. "Just let him keep coming after us." "No." Ethan's voice was quiet, but absolute. "We end this, but we do it right." "How?" "I'm still working on that part." He swayed again, and Doc Rafferty pushed him back into the chair. "What you're going to do right now is rest. You've lost blood, and you're in shock, even if you're too stubborn to admit it." The doctor looked at Morrison. "He needs to stay here tonight. He's in no condition to ride." "No." Ethan shook his head. "I need to get Clara home. Need to make sure she's safe." "I'll take her," Morrison said. "My boys will ride escort. Nobody's touching her with 6 armed men around." "I'm not leaving you." Clara's voice cracked. Not when you're hurt." Ethan looked up at her, and she saw how much the bravado was costing him. Saw the pain he was trying to hide, the exhaustion pulling at his features. "You can't stay here. It's not proper." "I don't care about proper." "Clara." "I'm staying." She looked at Morrison. "If that's all right with you." Frank Morrison smiled slightly. "Reckon I can spare a room. Doc can stay too, keep an eye on the patient." It's settled then. Clara sat in the chair beside Ethan, took his hand, the one that wasn't bloody, and held it like a lifeline. "I'm not leaving you." Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won, and he just nodded. All right. Thomas spoke from the doorway. I'm going back to town. Going to talk to Jake Morgan. Even if we can't prove anything, he needs to know what happened. Be careful, Ethan said. You too, son. Thomas met Clara's eyes. You keep him alive. I will. After her father left after Morrison and his hands went back to evening chores, after Doc Rafferty disappeared to find coffee, Clara and Ethan sat alone in the kitchen. The lamp flickered. Night pressed against the windows. And Clara finally let herself feel the fear she'd been holding back since Jesse Pike rode up with news of the fight. You could have died. Her voice shook. But I didn't. You could have. She gripped his hand tighter. If Morrison hadn't come. If they'd had more men. If that knife had gone deeper. But it didn't. Ethan pulled their joined hands to his chest, holding them over his heart. I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm not going anywhere. Marcus won't stop. I know. He's going to keep coming until... Clara couldn't finish. Until what? Until he kills me, runs you out of town, destroys your father. Ethan's voice went quiet. Maybe, but he's going to have to work a lot harder than sending 3 men with knives. This isn't funny. I know it's not. He touched her face with his free hand, thumb brushing her cheekbone. But I need you to understand something. I've been alone for 15 years, survived winters that killed weaker men, fought off wolves and outlaws and every hard thing this territory could throw at me. I survived all of that. You know why? Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because I had nothing to lose. Nothing worth living for except the next day and the day after that. His eyes held hers. But now I do. I have you. And that means I've got something worth fighting for, worth surviving for. Marcus Dalton and all his money and all his men don't scare me half as much as the thought of losing you. You're not going to lose me. Then trust me to handle this, to keep us both safe. He leaned his forehead against hers. I've got a plan. It's not a good one, but it's something. What plan? Tomorrow I'm going to see Marcus, face to face, private. Clara jerked back. Absolutely not. It's the only way. He just tried to have you killed. Which is why he won't be expecting me to walk into his office like nothing happened. Ethan's voice was calm. Too calm. He thinks he's won, thinks he's scared me off. But he doesn't know me very well if he thinks that. Ethan, please. I'm not going to hurt him. Not unless he makes me. His jaw set. But I am going to make sure he understands that if he comes after you or your father again, I will end him. Legal or not. Consequences or not. He needs to know that. And then what? He'll just back off? Maybe. Maybe not. But at least he'll know where things stand. Ethan's hand tightened on hers. I'm done playing by his rules. Done letting him manipulate and threaten and hurt people I love. Time he understood what happens when you push a patient man too far. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to lock him in this room and never let him anywhere near Marcus Dalton. But she looked at his face, battered and bruised, but absolutely certain, and knew arguing would be pointless. I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Her voice matched his for stubbornness. If you're walking into his office, I'm walking in beside you. We do this together. Remember? Ethan looked like he wanted to refuse. But something in her expression must have convinced him because he finally nodded. Together. But if things go bad, if he threatens you or pulls a weapon or anything, you run. Understand? Only if you run too. Clara. Together. That's the deal. She leaned in and kissed him, careful of his split lip, gentle as breathing. We started this together. We'll finish it together. Ethan's hand came up to cup the back of her head, holding her close. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. Good thing you love stubborn. Good thing. He kissed her again, deeper this time, despite the pain it must have caused. When they pulled apart, his eyes were bright. "Tomorrow, then. We go talk to Marcus, set the terms." "What terms?" "The ones where he leaves us alone or I make him regret he was ever born." Ethan's voice went cold as winter steel. "I'm done being pushed around. Done watching him hurt people I care about. Tomorrow, Marcus Dalton learns what happens when you threaten a man with nothing left to lose." "But you just said you have everything to lose." "I do." Ethan's smile was sharp. "Which is exactly why I'm not going to lose it." They sat together as night deepened, holding hands in Morrison's kitchen, planning what they'd say and how they'd say it. Doc Rafferty came back, eventually checked Ethan's stitches, declared him stubborn but stable. Morrison's wife brought food neither of them could eat. The house settled into evening quiet. Finally, Clara spoke the fear she'd been carrying since Jesse Pike rode up. "What if he wins? What if we go tomorrow and he, I don't know, has us arrested or hurt, or he won't?" "You can't know that." "I know I love you. I know I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. And I know Marcus Dalton might have money and influence, and men who'll do his dirty work." Ethan's voice dropped. "But I've got something he doesn't." "What's that?" "Everything to fight for, and nothing holding me back from doing it." He met her eyes. "A man like Marcus, he fights with money, with threats, with other people's hands doing the work. But if it comes down to it, if he pushes me far enough, I'll fight with everything I've got. And I'll win. Because I have to." Clara believed him. Looking at his battered face, his stitched ribs, his bloody knuckles that told the story of 3 men who'd learned the hard way that jumping Ethan Sawyer was a mistake, she believed him. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." Ethan pulled her close, careful of his injuries. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But Clara couldn't rest. Even after Doc Rafferty gave Ethan something for the pain, and he fell into uneasy sleep, even after Morrison's wife showed her to a guest room. Even after the house went dark and quiet, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, planning. Tomorrow they'd confront Marcus. Tomorrow they'd set terms. Tomorrow they'd find out if love and determination were enough to stand against money and power. And if they weren't, if Marcus won anyway, Clara would do whatever it took to keep Ethan safe, even if that meant walking away, even if it meant breaking her own heart, because she'd made 2 promises in her life. One, to marry Ethan Sawyer. The other, unspoken, but just as binding, to keep him alive. And Clara Bennett always kept her promises, even the ones that cost her everything. Dawn came gray and cold, matching Clara's mood. She dressed in the same wrinkled dress from yesterday, feeling less like a woman about to defend her future, and more like a girl playing at being brave. But when she came downstairs and saw Ethan already awake, already dressed, despite the pain it must have caused, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "You ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." "That's my girl." He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. The bruises on his face had darkened overnight to purple and yellow. His movements were stiff, but his eyes were clear and determined. They rode into Silverstone together, Morrison and 2 of his hands following as escort. Word had spread about the attack. Clara could see it in the faces that watched them pass. Some sympathetic, some curious. Some she suspected already taking Marcus's side because money and influence bought loyalty, whether people wanted to admit it or not. The bank sat at the center of town, brick and glass and self-importance. Marcus's office was on the second-floor windows, overlooking the main street, like a king surveying his domain. Clara and Ethan climbed the stairs side by side. Morrison waited below with his men hands resting casual on gun belts in a way that suggested they were ready for anything. The secretary, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers, tried to stop them. "Mr. Dalton isn't seeing anyone without an appointment." Ethan walked past him without breaking stride, opened Marcus's office door, and walked in like he owned the place. Marcus sat behind his desk, papers spread in front of him, looking every inch the respectable banker. He glanced up, and for just a second, one beautiful second shock flickered across his face. Then it smoothed into his usual pleasant mask. "Sawyer, Miss Bennet, what a surprise." "I'm sure it is." Ethan moved to the desk, leaning forward despite the way it must have pulled his stitches. "Considering you sent 3 men to make sure I wouldn't be making any more surprise visits." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Pete Garrison. Ring a bell works for you. Also tried to put a knife in my ribs last night." Marcus's expression didn't change. "If Pete was involved in some altercation, that's his business. Nothing to do with me." "Right. Just coincidence he jumped me the day after Clara walked out of your dinner." Ethan's voice went cold. "Just coincidence he happened to be on that road at that exact time." "Terrible coincidence. But coincidences happen." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Now, was there something specific you wanted? Or did you just come here to make baseless accusations?" Clara stepped forward. "We came to set terms." Marcus's attention shifted to her. "Terms? You leave us alone. All of us. My father, Ethan, me. You stop calling debts early. Stop sending men with knives. Stop trying to manipulate and threaten and destroy." Her voice strengthened. "And in return, we won't press charges for attempted murder." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. Charges based on what evidence? The word of a man who got into a fight he couldn't win. The testimony of a lovesick girl too naive to see she's being used. "Based on Pete Garrison's testimony," Ethan said quietly. "When Sheriff Morgan brings him in for questioning, when he's faced with charges that could see him hanged. Think he'll keep protecting you then?" Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Not quite fear, but close enough. "Pete's loyal. Everyone's loyal until the rope gets measured." Ethan straightened. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to extend Thomas Bennett's debt back to the original terms. 3 months. No early collection. No threats. When that time comes, we'll pay. Every penny. And if I refuse, then we take what we know to Sheriff Morgan. Let him investigate. Let the whole territory know Marcus Dalton hires men to attack people who won't bend to his will." Clara's voice stayed steady. "Your reputation won't survive that. Neither will your business. You're bluffing. Try me." Her eyes locked with his. "I've got nothing to lose, Marcus. You took your best shot last night and Ethan's still standing. You think I'm afraid of you now?" Silence stretched. Marcus's hands clenched on his desk, then deliberately relaxed. "This is about pride. You can't stand that I'm willing to offer you things Sawyer never could." "No." Clara's voice gentled into something almost pitying. "This is about you not understanding that some things can't be bought. Love. Loyalty. The kind of partnership that means something beyond contracts and transactions. You'll never understand that, will you?" Marcus stood face flushing. "Get out of my office." "We will." Ethan took Clara's hand. "Right after you agree to our terms. And if I don't, then you'll find out just how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." Ethan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You sent 3 men. They failed. Next time you'll send more. But eventually, you'll run out of men willing to risk their lives for your pride. And when that happens, when it's just you and me with no one to hide behind, you'll wish you'd taken the deal." Marcus stared at them, jaw working. "Finally, 3 months. Original terms. But if you default, if you're even 1 day late, I foreclose immediately. No exceptions." "Agreed." Ethan held out his hand. Marcus looked at it like it might bite him, but he shook grip, deliberately crushing. Ethan didn't flinch. "Now get out." Clara and Ethan turned to go. At the door, Clara stopped and looked back. "Marcus? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for choosing Ethan, but for whatever happened to you that made you think people could be owned." She walked out before he could respond. Downstairs, Morrison waited with raised eyebrows. Well, 3 months, Ethan said. We've got 3 months. And then we pay the debt and get Marcus Dalton out of our lives forever. He squeezed Clara's hand. Together. They walked out of the bank into morning sunlight, and for the first time in days, Clara felt like she could breathe. 3 months felt like 3 years and 3 seconds all at once. Clara watched the calendar like it was counting down to either salvation or destruction, unable to tell which until the final day came. The town watched too, some with hope, others with morbid curiosity, waiting to see if the unlikely couple would pull off what everyone said was impossible. Ethan threw himself into work with the kind of desperate determination that scared Clara sometimes. He sold cattle at every auction within riding distance, taking prices that made her wince, but that he accepted without complaint. He hired himself out for jobs he'd normally turn down, breaking horses, mending fence, anything that paid. She'd find him working by lantern light long after dark, should have sent him to bed. Jaw set, hands moving with mechanical precision. "You're going to work yourself to death," she said one night standing in his barn doorway, watching him repair tack that probably wasn't worth the effort. "I'm going to work us free." He didn't look up. Different thing. "Ethan, you've barely slept in weeks." "I'll sleep when we've paid the debt." Clara crossed to him and physically took the leather from his hands. "You'll sleep now. For a few hours at least. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." He looked at her then, and she saw the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. The fear he wouldn't admit to. The weight of knowing that if he failed, it wasn't just him who'd pay the price. What if it's not enough? His voice cracked on the words. What if we get to that final day and we're still short? Then we'll figure something out. Together. Clara touched his face, feeling the rough beard he hadn't had time to shave. "But killing yourself won't help. Come inside. Rest. Let me take care of you for once." Ethan let her lead him into the cabin. Let her push him down on the sofa. Let her pull off his boots and cover him with blankets. He was asleep before she finished, exhaustion finally winning over willpower. Clara sat beside him in the firelight and did her own calculation. They had 2 weeks left. Ethan had raised maybe $400 through sheer force of will and endless work. Her small inheritance had contributed another 50. They were close, so painfully close. But close wasn't enough when Marcus Dalton was counting every penny and waiting for them to fail. She must have dozed because she woke to voices outside. Male voices. Angry. Clara shot to her feet, heart hammering. Ethan was already awake, already moving toward the door with a rifle in his hands. He caught her eye and shook his head. "Stay back." But Clara wasn't staying anywhere. She grabbed the shotgun Ethan kept loaded by the door and followed him out into the darkness. 4 men on horses. Even in the dim light from the cabin, Clara recognized Pete Garrison. The man who'd tried to kill Ethan. The man who worked for Marcus. "Sawyer," Garrison's voice carried. "We got business." "No, we don't." Ethan's rifle stayed steady. "You're on my land. Turn around and leave." "Can't do that. Mr. Dalton sent us. Said to remind you the debt comes due in 2 weeks. Said to make sure you understand there won't be no extensions this time." "I heard him the first time. Now get off my property." "Or what you'll shoot." Garrison laughed. "That's 4 witnesses against 1 man. Sheriff Morgan would have to arrest you." "Then I'll make sure you're too dead to witness anything." Ethan's voice went cold. "Your choice. Leave now or stay forever. I'm past caring which." Clara stepped up beside him, shotgun raised. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "That's 2 guns against 4 men. Better odds than you had last time. Want to try again?" Garrison's horse danced nervously. The other men looked uncertain. Finally, Garrison spat on the ground. "You got 2 weeks. Then we'll see how brave you are when Mr. Dalton owns everything you got." They rode off into the darkness, and Clara's knees nearly gave out. Ethan caught her, steadied her, took the shotgun before she could drop it. "You all right?" "No." Her voice shook now. I'm terrified. They could have, you could have, but they didn't, and I didn't. He pulled her against him. They were just trying to scare us. Marcus's way of applying pressure. It's working. Clara's fingers clenched in his shirt. Ethan, what are we going to do? Even if we raise the full 500, Marcus will find some other way to hurt us. Some other debt to call in. Some other threat. It'll never end. Yes, it will. Ethan's voice was quiet but absolute. After we pay this debt, we're done with him. Done with this town if we have to be. We'll go somewhere Marcus Dalton's money doesn't reach. And leave my father? We'll take him with us. Start over. All three of us. He pulled back to look at her face. I know that's not what you wanted. I know you came back here because this was home. But Clara, home is wherever you are. She said it firmly, meaning every word. If we have to leave Silverstone, we leave, as long as we're together. Relief flooded his expression. You mean that? I've spent 8 years proving I mean what I say. When are you going to start believing me? Ethan laughed a real laugh, the first she'd heard in weeks, and kissed her hard. I believe you. God help me, I believe you. They went back inside, but neither could sleep after that. Just sat by the fire holding hands and making plans for a future that felt both closer and farther away than ever. Morning came with unexpected news. Clara rode into town to buy supplies and found the main street buzzing with gossip. Something had happened. Something big enough that even Mrs. Henderson stopped her usual complaining to talk about it. Sarah Morgan caught Clara outside the general store, eyes bright with news. Have you heard? Heard what? Marcus Dalton's leaving, selling the bank, moving back east. Clara's stomach dropped. What? Apparently his father died, left him everything. A fortune, they say. More money than this whole territory's worth. Sarah gripped Clara's arm. He's leaving Clara, within the month. The new bank owner is coming from Denver. Mr. Reynolds. Jake says he's fair, honest. But the debt will transfer to the new owner, under the original terms, 3 months from signing, which means you've got... Sarah calculated quickly. 2 weeks still, but Mr. Reynolds isn't Marcus. He won't play games. Pay the debt on time and you're free. Simple as that. Clara's head spun. Marcus is really leaving. Train tickets already bought. He's packing up the house now. Sarah's expression softened. You won, both of you. You stood up to him and you won. Clara wanted to feel relief, wanted to feel triumph. But all she felt was numb. They weren't safe yet. Still had to raise that last $50. Still had to pay on time or risk everything with a new banker they didn't know. She thanked Sarah and rode straight to Sawyer Ranch. Found Ethan in the corral, and the look on her face brought him running. What's wrong? Clara told him everything, watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been hope. He's leaving. Yes. Just leaving. Giving up. Apparently he got a better offer. Clara tried to smile. Turns out we weren't worth staying for. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, we still need $50. I know. And we've got 2 weeks to find it. I know that too. He looked at her, and Clara saw the calculations running behind his eyes. The same calculations she'd been doing for days. They'd sold everything they could sell, done every job available, scraped together every penny from every source, and they were still $50 short. There might be one more option. Ethan's voice was careful. The Hendricks family. They've been wanting to buy my north pasture. Said they'd pay $200 for it. Clara's heart sank. That's your best grazing land. It's land. We can live without it. Ethan, we can't live without clearing this debt. He gripped her shoulders. It's just land, Clara. Just dirt and grass. I'd sell every acre I own if it meant keeping you safe. You love that land. I love you more. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I'll ride over tomorrow. Make the deal. But that night, lying in her small room above her father's shop, Clara couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Ethan's face when he talked about his ranch. The pride in his voice when he showed her the fence lines he'd built by hand. The way he'd worked 15 years to build something that was his. And now he'd sell the best part of it. For her. For a debt that was really her father's. For a future they might not even get to have in Silverstone. She got up before dawn, dressed quietly, and slipped out before her father woke. But she didn't go to Sawyer Ranch. Instead, she climbed the hill to the Dalton house. Marcus was loading a wagon when she arrived, supervised by the same tired housekeeper Clara had met months ago. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face, before settling into something harder. "Clara, come to gloat." "No." She dismounted, walked to him with her head high. "I came to make one final offer. I'm not interested in... You gave me something once." Clara pulled off her gloves, revealing her hands. "A piece of advice. You said love doesn't pay debts, doesn't put food on the table. You were right about that. But you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "Love makes you fight harder than money ever could. Makes you willing to do things pride would normally prevent." She met his eyes. "I'm here to ask you to forgive my father's debt. All of it. Not for me. Not even for him. But because you're about to leave here with more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes and $50 is all that stands between us and losing everything." Marcus stared at her. "You're asking for charity." "I'm asking for mercy. There's a difference." "Why should I show you mercy?" "You chose Sawyer, embarrassed me in front of the whole town, made me look like a fool. Because I think somewhere under all that pride and anger you're not a bad man. You're just a lonely one." Clara's voice softened. "I think you wanted someone to choose you. Not your money, not your position. Just you. And I couldn't give you that because my heart already belonged to someone else. That's supposed to make me forgive the debt. No. But maybe it'll make you remember what it's like to want something you can't buy. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you understand that letting us go would be the kindest thing you could do." Clara's throat went tight. "Please, Marcus. You're leaving anyway. You'll never see us again. Let us have our fresh start. Let my father keep his shop. Let Ethan keep his land. Show me I was right to believe you're better than everyone thinks." Silence stretched between them. The housekeeper had stopped working to watch. A crow called from somewhere overhead. And Clara held her breath, knowing she'd just laid everything at the feet of the man who'd tried to destroy them, and hoping, praying there was enough humanity left in him to accept it. Finally, Marcus spoke. "You really love him, Sawyer?" "With everything I am." "And he loves you the same, more. He'd sell the land he's worked 15 years to build just to keep me safe. That's how much." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his coat. The debt contract. Clara's hands trembled as he stared at it. "My father once told me that the measure of a man isn't how he treats his friends, it's how he treats the people who've bested him." Marcus's jaw worked. "You bested me, Clara Bennett. You and Sawyer both. You stood up when I expected you to break. You chose love when I offered security. You made me feel like..." He stopped, then continued roughly. "Like everything I'd built meant nothing compared to what you two had." He tore the contract in half, then quarters, then kept tearing until it was confetti in his hands. "There. Debt canceled. Tell your father he's free. Tell Sawyer he can keep his precious land." Marcus's voice went harsh. "And tell them both that Marcus Dalton isn't the villain they thought. Just a man who bet on the wrong hand and lost." Clara's eyes burned. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just..." He looked away. "Be happy. Both of you. Make it mean something." "We will." Clara's voice cracked. "I promise we will." She rode back to town with tears streaming down her face, the torn pieces of the contract clutched in her hand, like they were made of gold instead of paper. Found her father already awake, working one-handed at the forge, his face creased with worry. "Papa." She held out the paper scraps. "It's over. We're free." Thomas took the pieces, looked at them, looked at her. How? I asked Marcus to show mercy, and he did. Clara's laugh came out half sob. He forgave the debt, all of it. We don't owe him anything. Her father pulled her into his arms and held her, while they both cried relief and disbelief and joy all tangled together until she couldn't tell them apart. When she finally pulled back, Thomas gripped her shoulders. You did this. You saved us. We all did. Clara wiped her eyes. But now I need to tell Ethan before he sells his land. She rode to Sawyer Ranch faster than safety allowed, heart hammering with urgency. Found Ethan already mounted, clearly heading out to meet the Hendricks family. She reined up in front of him, breathless. Don't! Don't what? Don't sell your land. We don't need the money. She pulled out the torn contract. Marcus forgave the debt. We're free. Ethan stared at the paper scraps like they might bite him. He what? Forgave it. All of it. I went to see him this morning. Asked him to show mercy. And he did. Clara's voice shook with leftover adrenaline. We don't owe him anything. We don't owe anyone anything. It's over. Ethan swung down from Buck so fast he nearly fell. Caught Clara around the waist and pulled her off her horse and into his arms, lifting her feet clear off the ground. Say that again. We're free. The debt's gone. You keep your land. Clara laughed against his shoulder. We won, Ethan. We actually won. He set her down and cupped her face in both hands, searching her eyes like he couldn't quite believe it. Then he kissed her deep and desperate and full of 3 months' worth of fear finally breaking. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan's eyes were bright. You went to Marcus alone. I had to. After everything after he tried to Clara, you could have... But I didn't. And he didn't. He just... She swallowed hard. He let us go. Let us have our future. And now we do. We have it. Ethan pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me. What? Marry me. Today. Right now. I'm done waiting. Done being afraid something else will go wrong. He pulled back to look at her. I know I was supposed to court you proper. I know I was supposed to give the town time to adjust. But I don't care anymore. I want you to be my wife, today. Clara's heart hammered. The whole town will talk. Let them. They'll say we're moving too fast. We've waited 8 years. That's the opposite of too fast. Ethan. Clara Bennett. I love you. I've loved you since you were 14 years old and promised to marry me. I've loved you through 8 years of missing you. I've loved you through 3 months of hell trying to keep us both safe. His voice roughened. And I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. As your husband. If you'll have me. Of course I'll have you. Clara laughed through tears. I've been trying to have you since I came back. I'm just surprised you're finally asking. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Today. Right now. However you want. Ethan kissed her again, and Clara felt something settle into place. Something that had been waiting 8 years to click home. This was right. This was always right. From the moment he'd pulled her from that blizzard, to now standing in his ranch with sunlight breaking through clouds overhead, it was always supposed to lead here. Reverend Hayes is in town, Ethan said. If we ride now, we can catch him before noon service. What about my father? We'll bring him. He deserves to see his daughter get married. They rode into Silverstone together, and this time Clara didn't care who saw them or what they said. Didn't care that her dress was wrinkled, or her hair was windblown, or that they were about to get married without any of the proper planning or preparation. Thomas was closing the shop when they arrived. Took one look at their faces and smiled. When's the wedding? Now, Clara said. If you'll come. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time they reached the church, half the town had gathered, some curious, some supportive, some probably just hoping for gossip fodder. Clara saw Sarah Morgan and Sheriff Jake. saw Frank Morrison and Doc Rafferty, saw faces she knew and some she didn't, all pressed together in the small church that suddenly felt too full and too empty all at once. Reverend Hayes stood at the altar prayer book, already open like he'd been expecting them. Maybe he had been. Maybe the whole town had been waiting for this since the day Clara rode back into Silverstone with promises on her lips and determination in her heart. Clara walked down the aisle on her father's good arm, and for just a moment she thought of her mother. Wished she could be here. Wished she could see this. But then she looked at Ethan standing tall in his best shirt, with his hair actually combed for once, his eyes locked on her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and she knew her mother was here, in every choice that led to this moment, in every promise kept, and every fear overcome. Thomas placed Clara's hand in Ethan's and stepped back. The Reverend began speaking, but Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Ethan's face, the way his thumb rubbed across her knuckles, the slight tremor in his hands that told her he was just as overwhelmed as she was. "Do you, Ethan Sawyer, take Clara Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice rang clear. "And do you, Clara Bennett, take Ethan Sawyer to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara smiled through tears. "I do. I always have." Laughter rippled through the church, soft and warm and approving. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride." Ethan pulled Clara close and kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission. The church erupted in applause and cheers, and a few wolf whistles from Morrison's ranch hands. When they finally pulled apart, Clara looked out at the gathered crowd and saw something that made her throat tight. Not judgment, not disapproval, just people. Her people smiling and clapping and celebrating a love that had waited 8 years to be recognized. Even Mrs. Henderson was dabbing her eyes. Outside, the whole town seemed to pour into the street. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else brought out food from the restaurant. Within an hour, Main Street had transformed into an impromptu celebration that reminded Clara of those summer socials from her childhood. Sarah Morgan hugged her tight. "I knew you'd make it work." "Did you?" "Well, I hoped anyway." Sarah smiled. "You two are stubborn enough to move mountains. Figured you could handle one banker with delusions of grandeur." Clara laughed and accepted hugs from what felt like the entire population of Silverstone. Even people who'd been whispering about her relationship with Ethan now offered congratulations and well wishes. Maybe they'd genuinely come around. Maybe they just liked parties. Clara decided she didn't care which. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Ethan pulled her away from the crowd. They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land, and for the first time all day, they were alone. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right." Clara leaned into him. "I'm married to the man I've loved since I was 14. My father's debt is paid. Marcus is leaving. We have our whole future ahead of us." She looked up at him. "How could I be anything but perfect?" Ethan's arms came around her. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, that this is some dream, and I'll open my eyes and you'll be gone. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise." Clara smiled. "And I'm very good at keeping promises." "So I've noticed." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming back. For keeping that ridiculous promise. For being stubborn enough to love me despite every reason not to." His voice roughened. "For giving me a reason to stop being alone." Clara turned in his arms to face him fully. "Thank you for being worth coming back for keeping my mother's ribbon for 8 years, for fighting for us even when it seemed impossible." She touched his face. "For being exactly who you are." They stood together as the stars came out, as the celebration continued without them, as the future they'd fought so hard for finally began. Tomorrow, they'd go back to the ranch. Tomorrow, they'd start building their life together properly. Tomorrow, they'd figure out all the small practical things that marriage required. But tonight, They just held each other and breathed, and let themselves believe that sometimes, against all odds, promises made by 14-year-old girls really did come true. The lonely cowboy wasn't lonely anymore. The girl who'd promised to marry him had kept her word, and together they'd won something more valuable than money or land or approval. They'd won each other. And that was enough. That was everything. 1 year later, Clara stood on the porch of Sawyer Ranch, her ranch now too, watching the sun set over land that stretched as far as she could see. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the life growing inside her. Their child. The future they'd built together made real. Ethan rode up from checking the south fence, Buck's hooves kicking up dust in the golden light. He dismounted and climbed the porch steps, pulling Clara into his arms, despite her protests about being too big and ungainly. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her hair. "I'm enormous. Beautifully enormous." He placed his hand over hers on her belly, and Clara felt their child kick in response. Ethan's face lit up like it did every time. Strong, like her mother. Could be a boy. Either way, strong. He kissed her softly. "How was town?" "Good. Sarah says the baby could come any day now. She's got everything ready." Clara smiled. "And Mrs. Henderson stopped me outside the store. Said she always knew we'd make it work." "Did she now?" "Apparently we were her favorite love story all along." Ethan laughed, the sound that still made Clara's heart skip. People remember things how they want. "Let them." Clara leaned into him. "We know the truth." The truth was, they'd fought for this. Had faced down threats and debts and a whole town's skepticism. Had proven that sometimes age was just a number and promises were worth keeping, and love was stronger than money or influence or any obstacle thrown in its path. Marcus Dalton had left Silverstone the day after forgiving the debt. Word had reached them 6 months later that he'd married some society woman in Boston. Clara hoped he'd found whatever he was looking for, hoped he'd learned that some things couldn't be bought or forced. Thomas had healed. His hand would never be quite right, but he was back at the forge working with an apprentice now. Planning to teach his grandchild the trade someday, he said. Planning to pass on what generations of Bennetts had built. And Sawyer Ranch thrived. The cattle Ethan hadn't had to sell had multiplied. The land he hadn't had to forfeit had yielded good grazing. They'd bought the north pasture back from the Hendricks family at a fair price, and now the ranch was whole again, growing, prospering. But none of that mattered as much as this standing on the porch with her husband's arms around her and their child between them, and the future stretching out like the land before them. Endless. Full of possibility. Theirs. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. Giving up Boston. The education. The life you could have had. Not for a second. Clara turned in his arms. "This is the life I chose, the life I fought for, the life I always wanted." She kissed him. "You're the life I always wanted. Even when I tried to send you away. Especially then. Made it more satisfying when you finally gave up and admitted you loved me." Ethan smiled against her lips. "Stubborn woman." "Lucky man." "Very lucky." He pulled back to look at her face, and Clara saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. Love. Certainty. A future neither of them was afraid of anymore. "I love you, Clara Sawyer." "I love you too." She placed his hand more firmly on her belly. "And I kept my promise. Took 8 years longer than expected, but I kept it." "That you did." Ethan's voice went soft with wonder. "That you did." They stood together as the sun disappeared and the first stars emerged, and somewhere inside the house, the life they'd built together waited to be lived. A life born from a blizzard and a promise, and the stubborn determination of two people who refused to let the world tell them what was possible. Clara Bennett had told a lonely cowboy she'd marry him when she was old enough. At 22, she'd kept her word, and in doing so, she'd proven that some promises were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything it took to make them real. The lonely cowboy had found his home. The girl had become a woman. And together, they'd built something that money couldn't buy and time couldn't erode. They'd built forever. And it started with a promise that never should have mattered, but always did.